IB Nation, Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, our new partners of FanDuel. That's Sean Davis. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are back ready to rock and roll with the latest Notre Dame RTCF show. For those who are new to this or forget, RTCF means we are going to talk about a recruiting topic, R, a Notre Dame team topic, T, and then we're going to talk about a college football topic, which is the CF, RTCF show. And today's three topics, we're going to begin by talking about the state of the recruiting at cornerback, and that's going to be a pretty positive show based on how recruiting has gone at the position. I'm going to break down the past, present, and future of recruiting at that position. That'll be topic number one today. Topic number two, our Notre Dame topic, is going to be who are the players that Sean and I believe have to break out for Notre Dame this year. Not guys that we think will break out, but guys that have to break out. Who are the guys that Notre Dame needs to step up and play at a high level if this program is going to achieve the success it's capable of? We'll talk a few guys on offense, a few guys on defense, have some fun with it. And speaking of big-time players, the final show is we're going to look at the top Heisman candidates. And so we're going to look at FanDuel's odds of Heisman candidates, talk about each player. We're going to talk about Notre Dame players that are the highest candidates, which is interesting. At FanDuel, it's not Jeremiah Love as the number one player, best odds for Notre Dame to win the Heisman Trophy. And then we've got a few sleeper picks for you as well they're going to talk about when it comes to the Heisman Trophy. But, Sean, first topic for today, we are going to talk Notre Dame cornerback recruiting. We're going to talk past, present, and future. But just big picture, boy, I got to tell you, Sean, it is night and day with where we've been. Just talking about a big picture, and this is a position that Notre Dame is. When we were kids, Notre Dame was pumping out big time corners every year. I mean, it was Todd Light, Tom Carter, Bobby Taylor. Just Jeff Burris starts at corner, moves to safety. They were so loaded at corner. And there were years they had backup corners getting drafted into the NFL draft. And then they kind of went through a period where it was some good moments. In the 2000s, I think the best corner that Notre Dame had was a former soccer player that was a walk-on. It was like a Jordan Faison type of player who, was a Division I caliber football player, but was considered even better in another sport, hit soccer for Shane Walton and lacrosse for Jordan Faison. And then you get into the last 20 years, it's been some moments, some Robert Blantons, Darren Walls early in his career before injuries and other things kind of impacted him. Obviously Julian Love and Troy Pride were a great combination, but it was really good for a couple of years and then down, and then really good for a couple of years and then down. It just couldn't find that consistency. And honestly, Sean, even the best players they had were not like elite players. Shane Walton was a heck of a college player, but he wasn't an elite player, like an elite talent. He wasn't a first, second round draft pick type of player. And Julian Love was a heck of a college football player, but was another guy that was, not going to translate to being an elite corner at the next level. He wasn't that 6'1", 4'3", 4'4" type of guy. So you fast forward to the Mike Mickens era, things start off well, or not super well for him, because Mike Mickens is like, hey, welcome to Notre Dame. And by the way, your first recruiting class has to be recruited entirely from your office because of COVID. You couldn't go on the road and get to know kids. You couldn't have kids visit. That 2021 class had some players with some tools, but also there were some risks being involved there. And one of the players they got that I liked a lot, there were some red flags that they didn't really know that I think they would have probably landed and found out if they could go on the road and have gone to his high school, things like that. But starting with the 2022 class, Sean, until recently, we have seen things change dramatically. And then looking forward, it's really in a great place. But I think this is one of those positions, Sean, that for a long time, people thought Notre Dame can't recruit that position at an elite level. And what Mike Mickens has done, and we'll get into specifics here in a second, but what Mike Mickens has done, big picture, is he's proven that's false. Just absolutely not true. If you can evaluate properly and you can sell this and you can put a good product on the field, you can recruit big-time players in Notre Dame. Sometimes they'll be highly ranked, like a Christian Christian Gray, like a Kari Adams. Sometimes they'll be under the radar guys like a Benjamin Morrison, like a Leonard Moore. But the fact is, the one common denominator, all are elite talents. You can recruit those type of players in Notre Dame if you're willing to put into work, if you're someone who has talent as a coach and a recruiter. And the narrative about recruiting cornerback at Notre Dame in the last 4 years has just dramatically changed. I would argue more than any position on this football team.
It's amazing because when you say that, it takes me all the way back to when Marcus Freeman introduced his new coaches. Harry Heastan had returned. Mike Mickens was there. You had Al Washington, who had come onto the staff. You had the new wide receiver coach, Chancey Stuckey. And I remember walking in the room, and you couldn't make it. So I'm walking around the room with 3 recorders, placing them at tables. But the first person I got a chance to sit down and talk to was Mike Mickens during that time, which was right in the middle of COVID when you were talking about. And just talking to him and getting he was talking about this day and the room being in this form. Even then, he had a vision. He had a vision, and he knew exactly how he wanted to go about things. And it's really easy to be able to do that when you are really good at evaluating the position. We know the difficulties of, number one, recruiting at Notre Dame because it's a little bit different. But because of the way he coaches the game and the way he looks at evaluation, he knows which kids, and like you said, the red flag, not being able to get out on the road. One of the other things that makes him a great evaluator is he's a great evaluator of the person. And so that goes hand in hand with what you need to bring in to that defensive back room at Notre Dame. So it starts right there with Mike Mickens. It starts with the plan, knowing what he wanted to do, and then being able to evaluate the player on the field and the young man off the field, and then just having, the development side, which he brought with him to Notre Dame because he was doing it at Cincinnati. So you knew he had that in his back pocket.
There was always these reasons why you couldn't recruit top players to Notre Dame. And there's always this belief of, well, you need a corners coach like this guy and a corners coach like this guy. And a lot of them are sort of like those snake oil salesmen. You know what I mean? Like they sell, they spin it. And the thing about Mike Mickens is his approach was, no, I'm going to be authentic and genuine. And if a kid doesn't want that, then I don't want him. And you saw it to where early on, you had to go work to find those guys. You couldn't get the 5-star guy in his first class. You had to go out there and find some hidden gems, and he did that in Benjamin Morrison. Also got Jaden Mickey in that class, who was actually the higher ranked player by the national services over Benjamin Morrison. And then once you got Benjamin Morrison and he had the success he had, that opened up some doors and opportunities for him to then the next year go out and get a Christian Gray, who was a young man that was looking at Notre Dame, LSU, Ohio State. So the 2 schools that are battling to be known as DBU. And for a while there, it was funny. He was trending towards Ohio State at one point, and then LSU at another point. And you'd talk to people around the program, and you'd say, like, how's Coach Mickens feeling about Christian Gray? And he's like, oh, he's fine. Well, what do you mean he's fine? He's like, he knows that when it's all said and done, Christian's going to realize he's a Notre Dame kid. But he just stayed the course. He didn't sit back and wait on Christian to come back to him. He just stayed the course and let all the other flashiness do their thing. And then when that all died down, it's like, here I am, still telling you the same thing I've been telling you. They end up winning that recruiting battle. And then you obviously go in, that's the 2023 class. Then you go into the 2024 class, and you get Leonard Moore, you get Carson Hobbs, who they flipped from South Carolina. You go to the 2025 class, you land Dallas Golden, who's a big-time player, top 100 recruit. You get Mark Zachary, who's a top 100 recruit. You get Cree Thomas, who is a combination of sort of that sleeper prospect. And so the success he had recruiting and developing Benjamin Morrison, and then the success he had converting Cam Hart to corner, which happened even before Marcus Freeman got here as the head coach. It was actually during Marcus Freeman's year as defensive coordinator when they started that process, really took it to another level, because Cam played some corner in 2020, but he was, didn't play a lot during that COVID year, missed all the offseason development. But Mickens started it really then. and then took it to another level in 2021. Then you get to 2022. By the end of the year, you've got Benjamin Morrison playing like a freshman All-American. Cam Hart's game started to really take off, and you saw how important Cam Hart was against USC when they didn't have him in 2022. And all of a sudden, the pass defense wasn't good anymore. And because they just could avoid Benjamin Morrison, they threw at him once, almost got picked, and Caleb Williams never threw at him again. And then you realize the next year, wow, it was smart for him not to throw at Benjamin Morrison like at all. But 2023 comes, and now all of a sudden Notre Dame's putting one of the best cornerback tandems on the field in college football. Cam Hart, 5th-round draft pick, nothing to, write home about. But what does Cam do as a rookie? He earns a starting job for the Chargers. And it's like, okay, like this guy knows what he's doing. And so the success he had in evaluating players, developing players, has now led to where you're able to evaluate and develop players that have even higher floors and higher ceilings, like a Kari Adams. And obviously you've got Aiden Pouncey in this incoming class. So when you look at the current depth chart, Sean, and you break down the cornerback position, it's a younger group, but it's an incredibly talented group and a deeper group of high-level players because of that recruiting success. And the fact is what's interesting is you have that depth despite your first class being gone prematurely. Obviously, Jaden Mickey transferred because he was getting beat out by younger players. And I think there was a desire also by Jaden to I think he needed a break from it all, to be honest with you. I think that semester of going to class and all that after the tragedy he had to endure personally probably was good for him. And then getting closer to home. I mean, Boise, Idaho, he originally went to Cal and then, committed to Cal. And he's going to be Boise. He's still a lot closer to home where his family is out in California after, losing his mom. And then, of course, Benjamin Morrison goes to the NFL. And then it's just that next man in mentality. So then, you've even had some departures. Micah Bell transfers out. Why did he transfer out? Because he was struggling to work up the depth chart. And so, but even then, I'm watching last year's spring game, Sean, and you saw Micah Bell with a couple breakups in that game, got beat for a touchdown, but also had a couple breakups in that game, a fourth down breakup in that game. And then, of course, you the Christian Gray class, Christian Gray does well, and then, of course, you have last year's freshman class. And the ability to stack the depth chart in ways that we have not seen in the past, where from like 2016 to 2019, the cornerback depth chart was primarily just developed by one class. It was the Julian Love, Troy Pride, Dante Vaughn class. And then that was it. And then when that class was gone, it was like you had to go get, Nick McLeod out of the portal. You had to play a true freshman in Clarence Lewis, and those were your starters basically on a team that went and played for, college football and made it to the college football playoff, played for the ACC championship. To see where it was then in Mike Mickens' first year as a coach to where it is now, again, I don't know that there's a position on the depth chart that has seen a more dramatic turnaround because of the recruiting of Mike Mickens than what we've seen at the cornerback position.
And I know for me, I think him having the responsibility of both defensive back and safety was a challenge that he really needed at that point in his career as a coach. Because I think it proved his flexibility and the layers and nuance of his development and his ability to be able to recruit an entire secondary and then teach and develop an entire secondary. But it also, from a coaching standpoint, and this, you can have one message going to the safeties and one message going to the cornerbacks. The blessing is now everyone in that defensive back room is being spoken to from the same voice and they're hearing the same voice. So you want to talk about continuity, and you want to talk about how that secondary came together last year and became elite at each level. That's something that's a trend that I would expect. And if I were a betting man, I would bet that that's going to continue, especially with the young talent in the freshman class that we're going to talk about. But just the overall job that Mike Mickens has done has been nothing short of incredible. Yeah. And the amount of time that he did it in. It's been nothing short of incredible. I go back to just watching that. I'm telling you that, first of all, because I think it was kind of a joint, if I can remember correctly, the decision for Cam Hart to go to the defensive side of the ball was kind of a joint decision. With Cam Hart had interest, they had interest in moving him. He comes over. And at that point in time, what you pointed out, because of the lack of numbers,
that started even before Mike Mickens got here. It was late in Cam's freshman year. It was kind of a Clark Lee defensive staff, Chip Long offensive staff saying he's a ways away. He was dealing with a shoulder injury at the time. So, yeah, you're correct. It was sort of a staff decision on let's let him try it out. And if it doesn't work, we can always bring it back over to receiver.
And the crazy thing is, when Mike Mickens shows up, he needs Cam Hart to be that guy. I remember in the offseason, the buzz was how good he looked playing the position. And you know how it is when you hear about it. We've been doing this for a long time. You hear about a buzz, but there's still something in the back of our minds, specifically at certain positions at Notre Dame. It's kind of a PTSD where you have to say, I don't know if I'm going to trust it until I actually see it. And so for me, I think I love seeing people that represent or bookmark the turnaround for a program, or the turnaround or the transition for a program. And Cam Hart is that. 10 years down the line, where we think Notre Dame is going to have several players in that defensive backfield going on to the NFL and performing well on the college level, it all goes back to the roots of Cam Hart, his development. And I think that speaks, and his leadership and what he brought to that room. Because I think he set the standard for how to work.
Yes.
He took it from Mike Mickens, the plan, and then he implemented it. And everybody that was, Ben Morrison got a chance to watch him. And then Benjamin Morrison got a chance to pass it down to Adon and Christian. And that is how you start a long list and a long line of great development and play in a particular room. It has to start with somebody that's able to take it from the coach, implement it, and be that living and walking example on the field. And for me, that bookmark will always be Cam Hart.
Well, I mean, Sean, it's one of those things where it goes back to a comment that you made earlier in the process. And Cam wasn't so much a Mike Mickens protege from the standpoint of he recruited him, but he did develop him at Notre Dame. But if you go back and look from 2010, Brian Kelly's first year, this isn't a Brian Kelly statement. It's just literally a point of reference. And you go from 2010 and you go all the way to 2021, which was the last year of the tenure of Brian Kelly. Notre Dame had a grand total of one captain who played cornerback at Notre Dame. One. And then Mike Mickens gets here, the players he evaluated, the way he coached, the type of players they brought in. They've had two captains in a row, 23 and 24. Cam was captain in 23. Benjamin Morrison was captain in 24. Sometimes you wonder, like, okay, is that guy really a captain, or is he just being named a captain because he's one of your best players? Well, if you watch the Here Come the Irish series, you realized Benjamin was a captain. Like, he wasn't just a guy that got the moniker because he was one of your best players, which we know Notre Dame has done in the past, and you kind of get it. You're like, look, this is our best player. We got to throw a C on his jersey, even though he's not necessarily a lead by the right way all the time guy. But you realize Benjamin was that. And he was absolutely – I mean, I'll still forget watching that video of him coming in before the Indiana game and telling Marcus Freeman, like, hey, listen, I'm already hearing Georgia talk in the locker room. Like, we need to nip that in the bud, basically. Like, we're not focused on this. What does Benjamin Morrison care? You're not even playing. That's what you might – but no, this is because he's still just as invested in this because as a leader, he took that – hey, I can't help this team win on the field, so let me try to help this team off the field. That speaks to the type of young men that he's recruiting. You listen to things that Marcus Freeman talks about Leonard Moore and the work ethic and the attitude, and we've got to know – both of us have got to know Christian Gray really well, and it's like it's not just talented players, but it's a type of young person. I hear similar things about about Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary, and I think that's a big part of it. And I'll make the statement here, Sean, before we kind of talk about the present and future of the recruiting position. I'm going to make this statement right here. Mike Mickens has done for the Notre Dame secondary, especially corner, but we're seeing in the recruiting trail, it also in coaching. I mean, you look at how quickly he got a redshirt freshman into Don Schuler ready to go and shine last year. The job he did in really helping Xavier Watts, because I think Xavier Watts' game was much better last year than even it was the year before. I think Mike Mickens deserves a lot of credit for that. But I'll say this, Mike Mickens, and I'm just going to continue setting it up, Sean. You know how I feel about certain coaches, so this statement's going to mean something to you. I think you know where I'm going with this. Mike Mickens has done for the Notre Dame secondary what Harry Hiestand did for the Notre Dame offensive line. He took it to a whole new level of dominance, of recruiting consistency, and of national respect. And then from within the team and the fan base, an assumption that, well, of course that position is going to be good because Mike Mickens is coaching it. Just like I felt with about Harry. Well, of course the offensive line is going to at least be pretty good. It's going to be some level of dominance because depending on fact, experience, and all these other things, but you just knew Notre Dame's offensive line was not going to be the reason you were going to lose a bunch of games when Harry Hiestand was at Notre Dame. And you feel that way about I do. I feel that way about what Mike Mickens has done an equal good job. The impact, the turnaround, the development, the mindset. Coach Hiestand was really into you got to prepare a certain way. There was a high level of expectations. I remember telling a story or being told a story by, and I'll just say it, it was Robert Hainsey's dad was telling me the story. And Robert was a starter, and Robert comes to a meeting without a couple things he needed for the meeting. And Coach Hiestand made him leave and go back. And like, nope, you're going to do this. Like, and it was something simple, like he didn't have a pad, like a notepad or something like it was. And made him go back and get it because his thing was you're going to prepare a certain way every single day. It wasn't just about we're relying on your talent. We're going to rely on your ability, which I think a lot of corner coaches do. Hey, I'm just going to go let him play. I'm not going to. Mike Mickens is like, no. I'm going to let you play, but I'm going to teach you how to play. And then you're going to go shine. There's the same level of expectations for technical excellence, mental focus, toughness, mindset, discipline that we saw Coach Hiestand implement on the O-line as he built Notre Dame into the dominant offensive line factory in all of college football. And I think Mike Mickens has done that same thing for the Notre Dame secondary and cornerback, especially because that's the focus here. It started at corner, and the way he's recruiting is you can see it's going to continue. First of all, before we about the continue thing, I want to get your response because you know how I feel about Harry Hiestand as a coach. You know. And the most impactful assistant coach Notre Dame has had since Joe Moore, Barry Alvarez were on the same staff. Just that's how I felt about Harry Hiestand. This is the only other coach to me that's on that level that Notre Dame's had the last 20 years. And I'm talking like elite level where you're saying that's the best in the business right there. And that's what I think Notre Dame has right now under
I think the only way you said it perfectly, and I don't want to mess it up or step on it. I'll just say this. I think you're correct. And in saying that, I think he has created the same thought process in recruiting that happens before he even reaches out to a young man. If you're playing that position, just as Harry did, if you're playing offensive line, Notre Dame is automatically in your top 10. It doesn't even matter if they even offered you or reached out. That's a room that you want to play in to get respect and be developed and eventually go on to the NFL. You know those rooms. Iowa is one of those rooms. Notre Dame is one of those rooms where they're already in the top 10 because of the standard. That is being developed by Mike Mickens. And honestly, it might be there for the long haul because it's there now and Harry's no longer here. that's the incredible job. That's when you do an incredible job of creating a legacy. That legacy stands and continues, even if you're not at the head of that particular position room. And Mike Mickens is developing this room to be at that point that we hope he's here, all of us, for the next 10 years. That's what we hope, but we don't know what the future holds. But I fully believe that the success, because of what he has established and what he has rooted, it will continue to grow if he does decide to go elsewhere for whatever reason 4 or 5 years from now. That's just what he's established. And I think you've made the correct correlation between the job that Harry Easton did for that offensive line room and what Mike Mickens has done for the defensive back. Who knew that the fact that we're sitting here, I would have never thought that we've known each other for a long time, over a decade. I would have never thought we were going to have this conversation ever, whether it's on the phone or whether it's on the show, that we're talking about the defensive back room being at this level.
And Sean, we were optimistic when Mike Mickens got hired that it would be better. I didn't see this coming. I mean, because we did see what he did at Cincinnati. I remember studying. He had a freshman All-American. He had a kid that was an All-MAC player, as a true freshman at Bowling Green, Nick Johnson, and obviously the job he did with Sauce Gardner, turning him into a freshman All-American in 2019 at Cincinnati. And you're like, well, hey, look, I think this is going to be good. Like, this is going to be a good position coach. But I didn't envision this. I didn't envision like the recruiting being what it was. I didn't envision the development being to the degree that it is. And obviously he's got a big test in front of him this season, getting Christian Gray to take his game to another level. You got to find a starter opposite of Don Schuler. You got another nickel that you're transitioning, and you have a lot of young players that are going to have to be counted on. But it's to the point now where I look at the cornerback room and it's like you're too deep. Like we're at the first full practice, right? And they're on two fields, and you're looking at like there's a lot of talented freshmen and sophomores on the other field, which is like the younger players, not the too deep, so to speak. You know, Jadon Blair's down there with the other unit. Even Keedron Young and Aeneas Williams are down there with the younger unit. You have a lot of these really talented younger players that are down there. Well, then you have, but on the quote unquote, top field, right, where the guys that are currently in the two deep, you've got Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and Cree Thomas all working in. This because they have to, because the depth chart is in a position where, because Benjamin Morrison left early, because Jaden Mickey transferred, these young players are now in the two deep at different positions. And then you've got a redshirt freshman in the number 2 nickel. And I think I called you afterwards, or maybe I was talking with Trev, and I'm like, it's funny how this would have freaked me out 5 years ago. That Notre Dame's got all these young players, like 3 freshmen, at your entire depth chart at cornerback is made up of a true sophomore, a redshirt freshman, and 3 true freshmen, along with the quote-unquote veteran Christian Gray, who's a true junior. Like, and that have freaked me out 5-6 years ago, because I'd have been like, you're relying on a lot of young players. But it speaks to 2 things, Sean. Number one is the talent that he's bringing in now is a much higher level of player, where we're not talking about Clarence Lewis having to step in if something happens to Tariq Bracy or Nick McLeod. And I love Clarence Lewis, but he's not an elite caliber talent. He's just not. Great worker, great kid, but he's just not that type of player. And I don't mean that to disparage him. It's just the reality of the situation. He's just not an elite level player. Where now you're asking the Christian Grays and the Benjamin Morrisons and the Leonard Moores, and now the Dallas Goldens, Mark Zacharys, and Cree Thomases to step in and fill those roles as 2 deep players. So the talent is much greater, but then also there's just you got to show me. Well, Mike Mickens has kind of showed you. It's not even about the freshman players. Like, guys, he's not a freshman All-American and a real freshman, not like redshirt freshman, a true freshman All-American in 2 of the last 3 years. And if there was an injury in 2023, it would have been 3, because we saw Christian Gray step in for an injury-related incident once, and he was phenomenal against Pitt and had that crazy one-hand interception. So it's like, okay, I'm not worried about it because of the recruiting at the position and the development. But since this is sort of a recruiting focus show, that's the part that matters, because it's like, look, you're working with a higher caliber prospect now. And corner, like receiver, like running back, is not a position I ever get freaked out as much about a freshman playing just in theory. I would be panicked about it in the past because it was usually a freshman who didn't have the physical talent to help you right away. It was more of a projectable type of player. That's not the case when you're talking about Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, and in my opinion, Dallas Golden, but maybe Mark Zachary, who, if you saw the video Notre Dame put out, pick six somebody yesterday in a practice inside the stadium on Sunday night. And that's where I think the state of the program from a recruiting standpoint is strong. The past coming into this year is strong, and the present class is strong as well, Sean. You've got Kari Adams, who's an elite prospect. Kari Adams is going to end up being the highest ranked player at cornerbacks, barring some, hey, we're going to drop him because he's at Notre Dame type of thing. Kari Adams is going to end up being the highest ranked Notre Dame corner recruit since they started doing recruiting rankings. Right now, Kari Adams is ranked number 29 overall by ESPN, number 37 overall by 247, and number 34 overall by the new Rivals on 3 rankings. And he's ranked as the number 22 overall player on the 24/7 composite list and ranked as a 5-star player. Darren Walls was ranked in the top 50, but he wasn't ranked this high. And obviously in recent seasons, Christian Gray was a top 100 player, but he wasn't ranked this high. Troy Pride was not a top 100 player. Julian Love was not a top 100 player. Rashawn McNeil was a top 100 player, but not ranked this high. So that's obviously a big pickup. And then your other two players, Aiden Pouncey and Chasten Smith, are both ranked as top 150 recruits by at least one recruiting service, I believe. And Kari Adams at 6'1", 185 is your smaller. 6'2", 185 is your shortest of the three corners, because Chaz Smith's close to about 6'2.5", and then Aiden Pouncey 6'3". So you're not only, okay, you got a great refreshment. I mean, there aren't many teams, Sean, that can go out and get Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Cree Thomas in a class, and then followed up by getting Kari Adams and Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith. And then they added Kari Adams after they already had Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith in the class. And then to talk to people, and you cover recruiting some for IB, when you talk to Kari Adams and people around him, Aiden Pouncey and Chaz Smith were pushing him to join the class. There was no, I don't want that guy in the class. It was like, hey, bro, come join us. Because Mike Mickens has sold them on, hey, fellas, I'm not just playing two guys. We're going to rotate. We're going to have a corner nickel and all that stuff. But also it speaks to the type of young men that he's recruiting. And you've gotten to know Kari especially, Sean. And like you talk about, he's the next in line of the Benjamin Morrisons, the Leonard Moore, the Cam Hart type of worker. Because if you talk to Kari Adams, he's very aware that he's ranked high. But it's not in a way that it's like, yeah, man, I'm the man. It's like, it's a blessing. Now I got to go out and work and show it. And so I think when you look at the future of cornerback recruiting and what's coming in next year, it's like this thing's not slowing down anytime soon, Sean.
Talking about a young man who is uber talented, but his character might be just as great as his talent is, and Kari Adams. But you touched on something that I think I was impressed with Jawan Sider. And I think this speaks to what you were talking about with Mike Mickens and Aiden Pouncey, Chaz Smith recruiting Kari Adams. And I think it starts at the top. When Jawan Sider says, I was shocked to come into this room, new coach, and not one of these players that knew they had to wait still behind Jeremiah and Jadarian contemplated leaving. Like, he talked about how unselfish the running back room, and everyone is willing to wait their turn and play their role. And that starts at the top. That permeates throughout every other position room. So that's what helps the recruiting. That's what causes everyone in recruiting to be collaborative, where everybody is not worried about, so if this guy comes, what is it going to be like? Remember, we heard some whispers about two guys that ended up being in the class together early on, people were wondering whether or not they would even go to the same school. In Notre Dame, they didn't care anything about that. But it just goes to, the collaborative effort and the selflessness that exists throughout the program in each position room. They don't care. We're going to find a way to play together. We were amazed, and we looked at each position and said, man, they have literally recruited positions in such a way that everybody they recruited in this cycle in 2026 can be on the field at the same time. Like, it's absolutely, we've never seen it like that in a full class. So, man, you have to be excited. You have to be excited. You tip your cap to Mike Mickens, but also just the overall vision of the program and the selflessness and how unselfish these players are. Like you said, they're recruiting more talent and more talented players. But with that, which is even better, high IQ, high character players with extreme talent, which we were told we don't know if those guys want to come to Notre Dame, and we don't know if you can get those type of young men to Notre Dame. And for years, you and I have been saying they're out there. You just have to go get them. You have to go. You have to be willing to go fight for them because they are out there. Clemson found them. Clemson was able to find them.
Isaiah Simmons is a guy that wasn't a highly ranked recruit. Not everybody they got was a highly ranked recruit. Yeah. I know that AJ Mullen or AJ Terrell was a highly ranked recruit, but if I remember correctly, Trayvon Mullen was more of like a top 150 guy coming out of high school. He was number 120 overall by 247, number 117 overall by Rivals. He turns out to be a big time player. So, that's a important piece of this. Just looking to the future, Sean, we talked about the 26th class, but also Mike Mickens is already off to a great start in 2027. A couple names to keep an eye on. There's a young cornerback out of North Carolina named Xavier Hassan, very talented player, very high on Notre Dame so far. Hayden Stepp is another 6'2" cornerback out of Nevada. That's another player to keep an eye on, a guy that likes Notre Dame a lot, that Notre Dame likes. Notre Dame is trying to recruit John Meredith, who is an elite 5-star player. Right now, if he had a top 10, Notre Dame would probably be in it, but in the bottom. But we've seen that before. They weren't going to get Kari Adams 6 months ago. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not where
most people think it's a Texas Texas school that's going to get them right now with a Texas.
Right. Yeah. But, like I said, it's early yet. That's another at least name to know. Ace Austin is a player out of Ohio that Notre Dame is on. Sincere Gaylor is a kid from Florida that Notre Dame is on. Larry Moon's a player that Notre Dame has been on for a while. So those are just some of the early names. There will be more players added to the board, but they're in a good place with a couple of those guys. Xavier Hassan especially is a player that I think that right now Notre Dame is in a pretty good position with. They seem to have some real good interest in him. And then Hayden Stepp's another guy to keep an eye on top of some of those other guys I talked about as a Bishop Gorman guy. I always get a little bit nervous when talking about Bishop Gorman guys, Sean, because Notre Dame just doesn't seem to have a great track record there. But these are elite level players. Xavier Hassan is ranked number 46 by 247, number 54 by ESPN, and number 60 by Rivals on 3. Hayden Stepp is ranked number 90 by the Rivals on 3 people, number 28 by 247, and number 8 nationally and as a 5-star by ESPN. So, they're after some guys that are already being recognized as big time talents. But as we've talked about, Ace Austin's another kid. He's a top 150 kid by 247 in ESPN, 175 by Rivals. So they're all recruiting ranking wise up there, but that to me is just kind of an added bonus because I feel like if Mike Mickens wants you, I don't really care what the recruiting rankings say. But in this case, it is Notre Dame getting more love from the guys that fit what Mike Mickens wants, but also are guys that are elite level players because those guys tend to be more ready a little bit early. So it's they're already off to a fast start. Now it's about closing, but I think you look at cornerback recruiting, they're in a great place. There's no question.
I think those guys, because we talk about continuing to develop and grow the brand of the defensive back room. But for Mike Mickens personally, I can almost bet that Xavier Hassan, Hayden Stepp, John Meredith, those are the type of guys that are like, okay, that is the next step, or that is the holy grail that I'm chasing after. I want to go get 2 5-star top 50 guys in a class now. Like, I've proven that I can get the top 150 guys in the class collectively. But now let me go. Let me dare to go into Texas and take this kid, John Meredith from Texas A&M in Texas. Right. 5-star. Let me go and get a Hayden Stepp. Because I don't know the success. Notre Dame really hasn't had success getting kids from Bishop Gorman. So let me go and get a big time kid from Bishop Gorman. And then Xavier Hassan, who, by the way, will be on campus for that Texas A&M game. That's another big time kid. So I think it's always something that coaches are looking to challenge themselves, just as they challenge the players. If you're going to be good at what you do as a coach, you have to challenge yourself. And I think Mike Mickens, just looking at the list of kids that we haven't even mentioned, the local kid here in Chicago, Tavares Harrington, out of Chicago.
But I view him more as a safety. So like
he's more of a nickel safety. Yeah. Down
so
the road.
For this purpose, I was more focusing on the guys that are
cornerbacks.
Josh Dobson's a kid that I didn't mention from South Carolina. Yeah. That's another one that Notre Dame is trying to make a run on as well. So yeah, but it's a really good corner class, Sean. Just looking at it nationally, there's a lot of high level corners out there.
Does this class feel more zeroed in? Because I think as his classes grow, it seems like he starts to zero in more and more.
I think
higher talented kids.
Well, I don't know if it's about higher talented kids. I really just think it's just guys that he likes. And it just so happens that they're higher talented kids. Like I think he's always pursued players like that. It's just there's now more reciprocal interest in from those players. Like a guy that Mike Mickens loved AJ Harris coming out, but his dad loved. I mean, family. Remember that family were big Notre Dame fans, but AJ just had no interest in Notre Dame. I have a feeling things would be a little bit different if AJ Harris was coming out now. So,
well, as the men that we are, it's a scripture that says faith and patience allows us all to obtain the promises. And I think we are seeing what Mike Mickens has done. He's been committed to the plan that he shared with me when I had a chance to sit down with him. And he's been very patient. And I think now we're seeing that on the offensive side, which is what, for fans, patience is one thing a lot of us don't have. I mean, it's just, you tell us to be patient. A kid gets on campus in April, or he comes into campus in June, and by August, we're like, man, he might be a bust. And it's like, whoa, relax. He's a freshman. And so that's what it takes through the process, because getting a kid to campus is what? A 2 to 3 year process, getting him to commit to your school, and then developing him and getting him to the point where he's an elite player for you is another year to 2 years. So you're talking about a total 5-year process that you have to stay with this kid from start to finish, and then another year where he goes on, plays at an elite level, and ends up leaving the program, which is a 6 year. I mean, that you have to be patient as a coach and committed in order to see the manifestation of what you believe in a young man. And I think hopefully we're starting to see that with Mike Brown, where he's going through that process of being able not only to go after kids. We saw in the last cycle, he got them on campus for officials, but he wasn't able to close. This year, he got them on campus, and he was able to close on a couple of those guys that he was challenging for. And the next step is Now, to get even more guys on campus and to go after even more talented kids.
24 was
Go
the
ahead,
year that 24 was the year they had some struggles getting guys to close out after Leonard Moore. 25, Dallas was always a top target for them at corner. So was
No. I said what Mike Mickens has accomplished and what we've seen the process that he's gone through is similar to what Mike Brown is experiencing.
Got it. Okay.
With the wide receivers right now.
Totally makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes
We're watching
sense.
him go through the same process of having to gain that respect from kids and get the reciprocal, desire
which
to
is
want to come.
Very similar. If you go back and look at to your point, the first couple of years of Mike Mickens, that first class, I mean, Mike Brown's first class is going to end up being better than Mike Mickens' first class. But it's not really fair to draw a direct comparison because Mike Brown's not going through the same world circumstances Mike Mickens went to. Then that second year, you go out and get Benjamin Morrison, you get Jaden Mickey, you kind of take that next leap. He was also the primary driver of, I believe, getting Jaden Bellamy that year as well. And then, like you said, it really started to take off after that. But there were some corners that they went after in the 21 class that they liked that they didn't get. It was kind of that similar thing. So, yes, that's a really good comparison. Very good comparison. But I was like, hold on a second. Like, I'm trying to remember who they missed last year. Receiver, definitely get that.
No.
No, I'm with you now. I'm with you now.
Yeah.
I lost you. That was a me problem. That was not a you problem. So, well, folks, that's going to do it for part one of our segment brought to you by FanDuel, where we talk about Notre Dame recruiting. We're going to get into a team topic next, Sean, that I'm very excited about. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do, folks, do us a favor. You see that little thumbs up button down there below? Go ahead and hit that for us. We would greatly appreciate that. Give us a like. If you're listening via podcast platform, if you're listening on YouTube, but if you're going to go back and if you have a podcast platform, one thing you can do to really help us out, all it does is take your time. Don't have to do anything financially, but just go to wherever you watch the podcast app, whatever app you watch our podcast, listen to our podcast, and give us a 5-star review and leave us a comment as to why you think we're 5 stars. So you can it really helps us kind of promote the show and grow the show and expand the show, and it's just really, really, really helpful. So we appreciate that very much. And then of course we also have our CFB Nation show that we're putting more stuff out on. You can subscribe to that too on any of our podcast platforms, but also you can subscribe to it on our YouTube channel as well. Trev and I are today going over our content plan for the year and talking about what are we going to do for CFB Nation. Sean and I are going to have some conversations about that as well. So you're definitely going to want to check that out and subscribe. Make sure you're also subscribed to what we're doing at CFB Nation. Part 2 of our show today, Sean, which is the T part of the RTCF show, which is a Notre Dame team topic, is we're going to talk about breakout players. And we've had plenty of conversations this summer, sort of predicting breakouts, who might be on the verge of a breakout. But what you and I are going to talk today, Sean, is a different type of breakout. We were talking before the show, who are the breakouts that Notre Dame needs this season? Not even so much I'm predicting it or I think this guy's capable of it. That's a much longer list and a much different conversation. But when you and I talk about Notre Dame's ceiling is this, getting back to the title game, who are the players whose breakout is most crucial to them getting to that point? Breakouts can be, for this conversation, is really more of the high-level breakout. A guy becoming a star or a guy who was a starter or role player becoming an impactful player. This isn't like this guy stepping into that number 3 role or that number 2 role. These are guys that they really need to step up as playmakers. And we're going to begin on the offensive side of the ball, Sean. And we're going to talk a little bit about the players on offense that we think have the best shot to be that player. And we're not going to start where a lot of people think we are. We're not going to start with behind center. We're going to start with what kind of moves out past the center to the sides. And my number one, Sean, my number one overall player for the guy that has to break out for the Notre Dame offense is Anthony Knapp. And this isn't about whether you think he can, whether you think he will, whether you think he should be the left tackle. Like, that's an irrelevant conversation at this point in time. Anthony Knapp's the starting left tackle of Notre Dame. And Anthony Knapp is a player with talent, with strength, with different skills. Is he a tackle or is he not a tackle? That's a conversation we've had a bunch of times. This is different. This is, the tools are there. He was a 4.5-star upside player on my breakdown, which is on my list, which is a top 50 national player. It's, could he get there? The reality is Notre Dame needs him to get there now. They need Anthony Knapp to go from a flashy but very inconsistent true freshman at left tackle to a consistent difference maker, to where the Louisville game, the Indiana game, those type of blocks, you think of the 98-yard touchdown run, go watch Anthony Knapp destroy Mikael Kamara on that play and open up that run lane. The game here and there where he was good in pass pro, they need that to become the norm for Anthony Knapp. I don't know if there's a single individual player, in my opinion, that can have a bigger impact on this team becoming a dominant offense than Anthony Knapp, of someone who isn't there yet. So obviously Jeremiah Love is just, dude, keep doing what you're doing. Jaden Greathouse, just build on what you did last year. Will Paulding, go back and do what you did 2 years ago at LSU. You know, Billy Schrauth, like, you do this. Ashton Craig, stay healthy. But like a guy that's got to raise his level of play. I don't know if there's anyone more important to this offense as an individual than Anthony Knapp, becoming that dominant player that we all know Joe Rudolph thinks he's going to be. And this is a chance for Coach Rudolph's evaluations of offensive linemen to get a boost if Anthony Knapp becomes that kind of player. Because now it's like, see, he caught all this heat for having him at left tackle. Now look what the kid has become. Like, I think, and then also practically speaking, with a first-year starting quarterback, I think Notre Dame's going to be really good up the middle. The edges, a little bit more of a question mark. Left tackle and pass pro, major question mark based on what we saw from him last season. But if he can be that consistent good player there and remain a dominant run blocker, I think he has a monster impact on this offensive line. If they're going to be a Joe Moore Award contender, he's got to step up and be that guy. If they're a Joe Moore Award contender, this offense is going to be really hard to stop. If this offense is really hard to stop, this team becomes very, very, very hard to beat. And that's why Anthony Knapp is where I'm starting the sucker.
And you can start there because that's a good anchor for the conversation. And then I'll extend it and you kind of open the door to it. I think both tackles are vitally important. I think both tackles have been viewed by several outlets as potential guys. You have Emil Wagner that's on the Outland watch list, along with Billy Schrauth. Like you said, Billy Schrauth, even with the injury to Charles Jagasaw and, you know, Sullivan Absher going in at right guard, you feel good about guard to guard. If these tackles, Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner, can both take that step forward, particularly in pass pro, it is really going to settle things down for the young quarterback to be able to ease into his game and to be able to develop week to week without having to worry about whether or not the line is going to protect him. That's the last thing you want your young quarterback thinking about. So I agree with you totally. That right there, that's a great anchor point for guys in positions or players that need to take that next step and be really good or become stars. You can start with Anthony Knapp and then extend it to Emil Wagner, because both of those tackles, it is I can't even really quantify how important it is that they become really good bookends on that offensive line. It's vitally important.
Huge. Sean, I don't know about you. I have a confidence in the interior of the line that it's going to be good. I thought Billy Schrauth was solid at times last year. He was always solid, and at times he was really good. He was rarely bad. I think like when he first came back from the injury, you know, the Navy game, there were some rough moments, but overall he was pretty solid. I thought he had a rough first half against Penn State, and I thought second half he was very good against Penn State. But overall, I mean, Billy did his job coming back from an injury. Now going into his really second full year as a starter, third year of getting starts. I just feel like he's going to be really good. I think Ashton Craig has always been good. Whenever Ashton Craig has played, he's been really good. It's just stay healthy. I mean, if your biggest question mark as far as who's going to start is Sullivan Absher, you're pretty good on the O-line up the middle. And even if he's just okay, you're going to get Charles Jagasaw back at some point. And if Sullivan Absher can handle the job, then, oh, well, I guess they're going to have to move Gerby Lambert inside the guard and let him, his 6'7", 335-pound, long, talented, athletic self play some guard until Jagasaw comes back. I'm just not worried about the inside. I think your point about them needing the tackles to become those consistent bookends in pass pro, I'm not worried about them in the run game. I mean, guys, Notre Dame ran for over 200 yards a game last year and finished in the top 10 in yards per carry with the hot mess that went on the offensive line all year with guys coming in and out and 6 career starts. I mean, the one thing Joe Rudolph proved to me last year is he can get this offensive line to run block pretty well. Now, yeah, I want to see a little better in the postseason, but again, that was partly because teams were just saying, we're going to put everything we've got stopping your run game because we know you can't beat us throwing the football. But it's the tackles that are the question marks. And if they can become, to your point, Sean, I talked about Nab, you talked about Wagner. If these young quarterbacks can drop back and just feel comfortable, like I'm not worried about pat pressure, they're going to be so much better, which has a big impact on it. And then speaking of the young quarterbacks, they need some big-time weapons to throw to as well. And a guy that I think has to step up for Notre Dame this year and has to stay healthy for Notre Dame this year is Eli Raridan. I think he's a very important piece to this puzzle. And to see a guy like Eli Raridan to come out, thrive in the pass game, get back to being the blocker he was, be an after-the-catch weapon, be a stretch-the-field weapon. He's like a dynamic version of Troy Nicholas. Like what Troy did with they would throw seams to Troy, deep overs to Troy. Tommy would just throw that ball up at like 9 feet and Troy would just snatch it out of the air and go get it. I mean, that's just kind of what they did in 2013. And Troy went from a guy with 5 career catches to a guy that was a second-round NFL draft pick in one season at Notre Dame. If you remember that, he was picked by the Patriots in round 2. And getting a guy like Eli to break out is going to be huge. It's always important at Notre Dame to have good tight ends, but I think it's especially important when you've got first-year quarterback. If you can give me a 6'7", probably runs in the 4.6 range tight end who's athletic and long and strong as a reliable weapon for the quarterback on top of good pass pro, now all of a sudden you're seeing the foundations of a quarterback who's comfortable, who's confident in what's around him, who settles in, and all of a sudden starts dealing. Because as you and I have said, well, I don't know if you've said this, I've said this, I think CJ Carr is going to start. If he doesn't, it means Kenny outplayed him, which either way, you're going to get a very talented quarterback on the field. If that quarterback can feel comfortable and confident in what's around him, it's going to be impressive because both of those kids can deal. And that's why I think Eli could be such a valuable resource to just mentally helping the quarterbacks get locked in on top of being, as Bruce Feldman pointed out, an athletic freak, which he is. And I thought 85 was probably too low, but I get it. I think he's a big one for me, Sean.
Let me tell you something. You get these bookend tackles and you have Eli Raridan, who I think the tight end room, in my opinion, is going to have a little bit more room to operate this year for several reasons. I think the usage is going to go up in comparison to what it was last year. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I do think the usage is going to go up. And I think Eli Raridan has a chance to get up to 40 to 50 receptions this year. I think it's a good shot he'd get 40 to 50 receptions.
You're talking regular season, right?
Regular season.
Right.
Yeah, regular season. And more than that, be a big-time viable option the closer they get to the end zone. That's what I look for Eli Raridan. I want him to have at least 5 touchdowns, Brian. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for Eli Raridan to have at least 5 touchdowns on his resume at the end of the year for the regular season. And so that's the type of production that will allow Notre Dame going into that August 31st matchup to top or do everything they can to make sure that game hits the over at 53 and a half over at FanDuel. It's right at 53 and a half. If you get the bookend tackles doing what they do, and you get Eli Raridon reaching the production that we expect, especially in the red zone and putting up touchdowns, Notre Dame is going to probably take up 60 to 65% of that 53 and a half. They're going to do their job. Now, will the defense allow Miami to push that total? Who knows? But I expect Notre Dame to do a lot of damage as far as that game going over the under at 53 and a half over at FanDuel.
Yeah. That I said, okay, they're expecting a little bit more points to be scored in this game than I thought was going to be. What was the I haven't seen the spread on that one yet, but that was an interesting one.
Minus 2.5. Notre Dame's minus 2.5 right now.
Yeah. And I know you had another pass catcher that you wanted to talk about, Sean, as well.
Well, look, one could say Jaden Greathouse, but I think Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison have pretty much showed. Like, Jordan Faison was the guy against Indiana and Georgia that really took a step forward. And then Penn State and Ohio State, Jaden Greathouse blossoms right before our very eyes. So I think both of those guys are solid, in my opinion. You know what you want, what you're going to get. But Malachi Fields, ladies and gentlemen, if he becomes that dude, if he just does what he did at Virginia for Notre Dame the past 2 years, the passing game is cooking with grease. First of all, because he's playing with more talented signal callers and throwers of the football. That's
as
number
passers,
one.
yeah.
As passers, yes. And number two, offensive line and the other talent. This is what I love about, and I think Jeremiah Love mentioned this when he was asked about specifically the running back room, and he went beyond that with his answer. He was asked about how explosive can the running back room be? And he was like, the whole offense is explosive. Like, every running back can take it to the house. The wide receivers, he started naming wide receivers. Then he named both quarterbacks. He was like, this entire offense is explosive. So for me, I really think Malachi Fields just being who he's already been. That's the comfort level it is for him. No one is expecting him to come in and be Randy Moss and put up Randy Moss numbers. Just come here, and if you do here at Notre Dame, if you can do what you did in production at Virginia, it's going to hit differently here at Notre Dame than it did at Virginia. It's going to have a greater impact on team success than it did at Virginia because of everything that surrounds you. And so that, for me, Malachi Fields has to be one of those dudes. He has to.
Your comments about Greathouse and Faison were interesting, Sean. And I did a little research while you were talking to back up your point, because I agree with your point. The issue with them last year, to me, was more about just throw them the freaking ball, more so than are they getting open. But here's a statistic for you. So counting from the Army game on, which is about when Jordan started getting a little bit into the groove.
He was healthier.
Yeah, but also a more important stretch because Virginia was kind of like, you're going to beat Virginia. But so Army, USC, Indiana, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State. That's the last 6 games of the year. Worst team on that schedule is USC. Army was ranked, and then, of course, the 4 playoff teams. Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse were targeted 50 times, Sean. 52 times. 52 times. Do you know how many times the ball hit the ground in those 52 attempts?
Are you about to eliminate a narrative? Well, go ahead.
7. 45 catches on 52 targets is good for an 86.5% completion rate when targeted from Faison and Greathouse. So, yeah, is there production jumps that could happen? Sure. With them, it's like, just do what you did the last 6 games of the year. The ball will come your way more because of the alteration in the offense. And you're now throwing with guys who have, and these aren't knocks on Riley Leonard. I mean, Riley was great at what he did, but he liked to throw outside and run. He wasn't a guy that liked to work the middle of the field as much. And at least he didn't last year. And part of that is because of how he was used at Duke for 3 years. That's how they used him at Duke. But 86.5% completion rate, if you get that level of consistency to go with a legitimate boundary vertical weapon, and if anyone saw the video that Notre Dame put out yesterday, Sean, I sent it to you last night. You were in the middle of your show. I was like, I want to send this to him, see if I can distract him during a show. I want to see if I can get him to like, hey, Sean, why aren't you paying attention to Reggie? I'm sorry, I was watching this video. That leaping catch that you want to talk about when I say catch radius, you want to know what an example of that? It's that video that Notre Dame put out last night with Malachi Fields. You're like, that quarterback wasn't even close to where he wanted to throw that ball to Malachi. I can promise you. I don't have to see anything else but that. And you're like, if quarterbacks can have that type of like, holy crap, go get that sucker with that dependability of Faison, a great house. That's how you develop a holy moly. This is a really talented receiver. This is why, this is exactly why, Sean, I've said all offseason, guys, this is going to be a top 10 receiver room. I don't know if it's going to be top 5, but it's going to be top 10. And there's plenty of talent there. Now that you've added Malachi and you've added Will Pauling and you've got some younger players emerging. You've added Elijah Burris, KK Smith hopefully is healthier. Cam Williams is a year older. Micah Gilbert's healthy and a year older. I am not worried about that position group. But to your point, if Malachi has sort of that Chase Claypool senior year breakout, I don't know how you beat this team, Sean. I really don't.
And you know what? Anytime you can have the foundation of the two guys that you just spoke about their stats being highly productive towards the end of the year and through the playoffs, that gives you a great floor. That gives you a great floor going into this year. And now Malachi Fields can come in and he can be your specialist in a sense. He can give you the things that those other two might not be able to give you on the route tree, right? You could allow Jordan Faison to do what he does. Allow him to work the field. Get him going in the screen game because you do have that big guy on the outside that demands attention. So now you don't have as many safeties or linebackers cheating towards the screen game, and he has more room to operate. It's so many things that by all of them being on the field at the same time, they're going to impact one another because of their different gifts and talents and how they complement one another. That's what I'm excited about, how complementary they're going to be, on the field when they're on the field together.
Last one, Sean, and this is the obvious one, and we'll save this for last. It's quarterback. You need the quarterback. If you're going to win a championship, you need your quarterbacks to be good players this year, which requires breakouts for two guys that combined for one pass attempt last season. And you need a breakout there. I don't think the breakout has to be to the degree that it does for other people. Like I think Anthony Knapp needs to be at least where people are wondering in November, do you think Anthony Knapp might be an All-American this year? At least it's a conversation where I'm not like, what? Did you seriously just ask me that? Like, that's the dumbest thing you've ever asked me before in my life. Well, I don't know, but he's at least in the conversation for me. That's what you want. Same thing with Emil. You want Eli Rare to be like, yo, this guy's going to continue your drafted streak. You know what I mean? Like, and he's going to be a high draft pick. And then, Malachi Fields, this is what you come to Notre Dame for. Have that breakout season with legit quarterbacks, and then boom, you're off to the NFL and you're a day 1 or day 2 pick. But at the end of the day, like that next level, that win in the championship was these kids have to break out, not just in their talent, the talent's there, but in their maturity and their decision-making and their ability to bounce back from mistakes. Because, hey, I'm gonna show you guys how smart I am. I'm going to hit y'all with some knowledge here that nobody's going to expect. And this is why I make the big bucks. You ready for it, Sean? Brace yourself. The Notre Dame starting quarterback is going to throw an interception this season. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And after we're all done freaking out about it, he's going to throw a second interception in a game. It's going to happen. But how do they bounce back from it? And what I loved is, so like, this is why people say, why don't you listen to anybody else? So I got people emailing me about certain things that are being said after the first full practice. And I'm like, it's wild how I'll walk out of a practice feeling a certain way, and then I find out that other people are just losing their minds. And I'm like, I didn't care about the second interception. This is a great play by Bronte. But what Trevor and I said when we looked at each other after that was, I want to see what CJ does to bounce back. And we wanted to see what Kenny does after he gets picked off by Adon. And it was the way they bounced back that should have been the story coming out of practice. Neither of them allowed their mistakes to snowball into further mistakes. The next throw that CJ Carr made, for example, was an absolute dime to Jaden Greathouse for a big play. And I'm pretty sure Kenny had one of his better throws, a throw or two after his interception by Don Schuler. And it's like CJ got hot after that. And then his third pick was hitting a guy in the hands and it jumping up in the air. So it's about, can they handle when those mistakes happen to where it doesn't send them down. Those things are things that I want to see, because they're going to need that if this team is going to reach its full potential. And that's why I say they're also last, because I don't think their breakout is the number one priority, because if all these other things happen, they're in an Everett Golson, you're riding the bus, not driving the bus scenario. And that's why we didn't start with the quarterbacks, because I don't think they need to break out as much as the tackles or Eli or Malachi. It's, you got these dudes all around you. Just do your job, man. If the throw is a 5-yard easy access throw to Malachi Fields, take it. If it's Jaden Greathouse in a one-on-one, bro, this ain't that complicated. Throw it to him. We're going to get you screen calls to Jordan Faison. You literally have no read on that one. Just throw it to him. You know, like, we're going to make this as easy as possible for you. Now just go execute. And that's why I think those other breakouts are even more important than quarterback. Quarterback's the easy one to go to, but it's not the most important. It's the final piece. That's the key for me.
And you talk about it being the final piece. Guess what else, Brian? The starter will be a better football player next year.
Well, heck, by November.
It's like,
yeah,
that goes to that patience. Like, have patience. This team is going to win games.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to win games. Have patience with the starting quarterback. I was talking to Malik on the show, and I asked him, Brian, I said, you know what? It's a pretty good chance that whoever starts at quarterback is going to have the same pathway you had. He said, what do you mean? I said, they're probably going to come out and play crazy the first game against Miami. 75% completion percentage, 310 yards, 3 touchdowns. Then they'll go and they'll have film. Somebody will have film on them the next week. They're going to the second game and they'll struggle to start the game. And then they'll start to catch their rhythm. I said, hopefully they won't get injured and they'll continue to ride the wave of catching the rhythm and end up responding to adversity the way they have been. I mean, that's what they've been talked to about. Marcus Freeman's talked to them about it. Mike Denbrock's talked about it. Gino Gaduli's talked about it. Like, I'm not worried about the mistakes. That's what Gino said, especially early in camp. How do you respond? How do you get better? You just echoed that. That's probably something that's going to happen, whether it's game 2 or game 3. There will be a game where it's going to be a rough start, and they're going to have to respond. And it's easy to respond when you have, this is something Malik was like, it was easy to respond when I got Will on the outside, I got this guy on the Breezy on the other side, you know. I lost Tarian, but I got CJ in the backfield now, and I got this beast of an offensive line in front of me. That helps me respond as well. And so this is what we're talking about. When we start with the anchor of the bookend tackles, we already know what the running backs are, and we talk about the floor of Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse, and then we talk about what could happen if Malachi Fields just simply does what he did at Virginia. Now you're talking about how much easier you make it, even after it being pounded into their ears, into the gateways in their hearts. Respond. Don't get caught on a mistake. Respond. It becomes that much easier when you put all of these pieces that we've talked about together before we got to the quarterbacks, that if they're doing their jobs because of the talent that exists, the starting quarterback is going to find it very easy. I won't say very easy because football is hard to play.
Easier.
But it's going to be easier. Absolutely.
It takes some of the burden
to respond. Yes.
Right. It's like last year, there were times Riley couldn't afford to make mistakes because they needed him to carry the team so much that he couldn't afford. I mean, when he would make mistakes, it's like the offense would sputter. I don't think you necessarily have that as much with this group because of what's around them. But if these other players, to wrap this up, Sean, if these other players don't break out, if the tackles don't take that next step, if Eli doesn't take that next step, if the receivers don't take that next step, now the quarterback has to do more to carry this offense. And that's why I think the quarterback being last is intentional, because the other things are going to be more important. The more those guys break out, the less you need your quarterback to break out to a higher level where he has to carry the team. That's also going to be true for a lot of these first-year starting quarterbacks. Same thing at Ohio State. You know, that offensive line, the sooner they can get up to speed and get going, the less pressure there is on Julian Sand, because he's going to then have, you know, he's got weapons to throw to, but it's hard to throw to an open weapon when you're laying on your back. Or, hey, why didn't you throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith? Because I had to start running before he got out of his break. Same thing in Notre Dame. So I think it's going to be key. We're going to move on to defense next, but before we do, folks, do us a favor. You see that little thumbs up button down there right below us, right between me and Sean? Go ahead and hit that for us. Like the show. Let us know you dig it, and we will continue to keep putting out more and more great content. Let's talk a little defense here, Sean, is this kind of the second part of this team factor, because this is a really fascinating conversation, because the defense is so good that it's just kind of, we can kind of assume that they're going to, you know, be really good. But I do think there are some players that need to step up if this defense is going to actually take a big leap, because I have a take that I don't know a lot of people are going to agree with. I don't think the defense was as good last year as it should have been or could have been. And the reason it comes down to is simple. It was injuries. I think the injuries that this team suffered, and then also with Jason Onye being off the team, you were never going to reach your peak as a defense. When you lost Boubacar, when you lost Patojo, when you lost Onye, when you lost Benjamin Morrison, and then, of course, once you lost Riley Mills in the playoff, you were never going to be that elite shutdown defense, but they were still statistically pretty good, in large part because they just didn't play very good offenses last year, even in the playoffs. I don't think neither Georgia nor Penn State had elite scoring offenses. I mean, Penn State had good numbers last year, but I mean, let's be honest, that offense wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire whenever they played a team with a pulse. And you know, like, they weren't bad, but like, they didn't do a whole lot against Illinois. They had scored 21 points and had 74 yards. Scored 27 points against UCLA. Scored 28 points against Wisconsin. Had only 270 yards of offense against Ohio State. Then they ripped up a lot of bad teams and scored a bunch on Oregon, who we saw in the playoff also had a pretty bad defense. But their offense didn't actually do a whole lot against SMU. They just kept turning the ball over. SMU did. I mean, Penn State only had 325 yards, only averaged 5 yards a play in that game. Averaged 5.9 yards per play against Boise State. And it wasn't like this really super impressive performance, in my opinion. And everybody talks about how Notre Dame's offense needs to get better. I would argue that Penn State's was worse in the playoffs than Notre Dame's was. This year's going to be different. You're going to play some good offenses this year. But I also think the defense is poised to get to its full potential, because it's hard for me to believe that they're going to reach that level of key injuries the way they did last year. You just don't often see that 2 years in a row. Barring that happening, I think that defense last year would have been a lot better without the injury. So this isn't like now that Al Golden's gone, his defense wasn't really that good. I think he did a phenomenal job considering what they'd lost. It's just that if you really stack it up, it wasn't an elite defense. Like with context of if they had to face a different schedule of better offensive teams, I think they would have had some games where they struggled a little bit more. This team is healthier and deeper, in my opinion. Having said that, if this defense is going to realize its full potential of being a top 5 caliber, championship caliber defense, I think there's some very, very important breakouts that have to happen. Sean, and I'm going to let you kick this off as I kind of set this up, because we're going to spend some time on one position for a little bit, and I'll let you kick it off because I think we're on the same page on this one for sure.
Yeah, in totality, for multiple reasons. I think the interior of the defensive line, and then we're going to talk about pass rush as well. But the interior of the defensive line, I think we've done multiple shows where we chronicled what championship teams give up on the ground on average. And it sits right around 96 yards per game on the ground. Most championship teams, that's what they do defensively. And so Notre Dame has been, chopping at wood per se, trying to get that down. And if they can get that down under 100 per game, that would be fantastic. And that would talk about the improvement of the interior of the defensive line. Injuries, like you said, played a major part in that. And then losing Jason Onyé for the reasons that we don't need to get into. But now the addition of Elijah Harris, then you get Jared Dawson, and then you get some of the guys that have developed, Davion Dixon, Sean Sevillano. You get Donovan Heinisch coming back, Gabriel Rubio. Now you're talking about going 3 to 4 guys deep when it talks about 2 men. And that's great depth to have at that position. And now you start to wear on the other team, and you start to take less reps away from top guys because now they're able to be strong in the late third, fourth quarter part of the game. So that's going to be vitally important. But that also, with that, be part of the pass pressure and pass rush as well. I think Jared Dawson specifically is going to add that. I think Jason Onyé is going to add that. And then I forgot to mention Armel Mukam, who we expect to take a step forward as well. Those are things, those small incremental changes and improvements go a long way. Just listening to you talk, now I look back in retrospect and I ask myself, what else was Al Golden going to do? Mm-hmm. Why did he fire and activate his linebackers so much up the middle? Mm-hmm. He was forced to do that because of injury and because of the guys that he had to play. You're playing a guy, Donovan Heinisch, that might be 280, 285. You're not going to ask him to sit there, anchor, and take on double teams. And you want him to get into a gap, get upfield, and then you try to bring a linebacker off of him and create tackles for loss and shut lanes down and make it hard for the offense to find a gap to run in. That's what you have to do. And so I think, like you said, Al Golden did an incredible job looking at the situation, taking the situation he had, and being able to call what he needed to call. Some question whether or not he might have pulled back or needed to pull back. And Notre Dame just didn't show up and play their football in the first half.
Right.
They just didn't play their game. It's as simple as that. We could sit here and armchair quarterback it, all day, but That interior of the defensive line for me, Brian, because I know we're going to
Yeah.
get to the exterior and the
No,
pass rush. For
I
me,
agree. I think you got to start
that free, because now
You got to start up the middle. You got to be strong up the middle.
it's almost like having a big man, but
Yep.
you don't have a guard he can play with.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I got this big dude down low that can dominate, but who's going to get him the ball, right? And so the interior of the defensive line has to get the ball to the talented linebacker core. They're talented. They're the ones that can make plays, wreak havoc in the run game, wreak havoc in the passing game, rush the passer when you need them to rush the passer. If they can be set up by the interior of the defensive line, you're going to see Drake Bowen take off. You're going to see KVA take off. You're going to see Jaden Osbury take off. You're going to see the rest, Preston Zinter, Man for Rain. You're going to see that entire group take off. And it goes to and is linked to the interior of that defensive line, in my opinion.
I think there's always a game that pops in my head when we're having this conversation. And it's the Pitt game 2012. And I was at that game because that year, remember, I was coaching in 2012 and 2013. So I was kind of a fan, and we had a bye week that week, and my wife bought me tickets to go to the game with her parents. So we're at that game, and I just remember the first half, Sean, because remember, they didn't play Lewis Nix in the first half. And they're just getting to Manti, just chopping him, just cutting Manti. He can't get, he's just flying to the ball, and they're free releasing to the second level and just chopping him. Just Pitt's up 17, I think 17-6. They're just all over Manti. And then second half, they put Lewis Nix back in there, and all of a sudden, Manti is just flying to the ball and making play after play after play. Because the reality is, I don't care how good you are linebacker. If what's going on in front of you is not allowing you to play your game, then you're not going to be successful. 100% agree with that statement. I'll go more specific. I think they need at least one player at D tackle. I think they need one guy to break out as a difference maker. Like, you don't necessarily have to be Riley Mills from last year, but if you can at least be Howard Cross from 2 years ago, who I think Riley last year was better than Howard 2 years ago, but both were really good players. You need at least one type of breakout like that. Well, I don't know if they have a guy like that. Well, did you think it was going to be Howard Cross in 2023? Probably not. So I think they need at least one, and then they need another guy to kind of step up in at least one area, whether it be Gabriel Rubio stepping up as a dominant run defender or somebody else stepping up as a dominant pass rusher. Because the biggest thing that they missed when Riley went out in the playoffs was they just didn't have that up-the-middle pass rushing presence anymore. And they had to ask Drake to do it from second-level pressures, and he was just missing. Does some of those throws in Ohio State get off if it's a 6'5" guy getting in your face with getting his arms up in that situation? I don't know. So I think that's something that I want to see. I think you need at least one guy to break out as a dude and at least one other player to break out as sort of even if it's just in one of the two dimensions that you're a really good player. I think they need that. And then on the outside too, Sean, is I don't expect their D tackles, no matter what, to be as dominant from a disruption standpoint as they were last year. If it happens, that's awesome. But I just don't expect it. Notre Dame, I think, ranked in the top. I had one person tell me they led the nation. I had somebody else tell me they were top 5. But as far as total pressures from the interior of the defensive line, Notre Dame was one of the best in the country last year. I don't expect them to do that again this year. But I expect them to be better against the run, to your point. Where I want to see some of the pressure come from is off the edge. That's where I think Chris Ash wants to and needs to get more dominance on the D-line is on the edge. And at least as a pass rusher alone, if not a two-way player, they need one of, if not two, of Bryce Young. But I think one will do enough. Bryce Young, Boubacar Traore, Josh Burnham, Logan Thomas, Junior Tuilamaka. One of those guys has to step up as a legitimate force when other team throws the football. If more than one breaks out, then this team is going to be really good. Because if one is just consistently really good, then other weeks it's this guy does well, that guy does well, that type of thing. But I also think, Sean, you need at least one of them to be like a difference maker, like a Foskey type of production on a per snap basis is what it off the edge. I think you absolutely need that.
For me, I think For me, I think that defensive end situation, you've kind of talked me off the ledge because I was thinking about it over the summer, and I'm like, man, I'm worried about this pass rush. I'm looking at, can we depend? I don't want to have to depend on the two guys coming back that are coming back from injury. If I can just have them be ready to go second half of the season and really peeking into the playoffs, now I'm like, okay, we're good. So now you talk about Bryce Young needing to take a step forward. But remember, we did a show when we really said, let's put to numbers. What is improvement for Bryce Young realistically? Like, could he explode? All right, he could. But we were both like, if he can get 5 to 6 sacks with some tackles for loss and a certain amount of pressures, that's improvement. And so if you get that from him and you get the two guys returning and Botello and Boubacar Traore to go ahead and show that they can get back to the form that they had at the beginning of last year. And then, the guys that look, Junior Tuilamaka was clutch in that playoff run. And I think he's going to get even better because this is really going to be his second full year being at that position. So now I expect him to be even better. And Josh Burnham, I think, let me tell you something that I'm not thinking about this. I remember the first time I saw Josh Burnham, I think he might have been 230 when he showed up to Notre Dame. Maybe he was so small, man, and they put him in. And I remember saying, yo, this kid has an incredible first step. And then he added the weight, and he added it quickly. Remember, we saw him, you guys saw him at Syracuse, and you were like, yo, this kid has been in the weight room. That was like literally freshman year. And I'm like, I think he's really catching up finally to the weight. And the position.
Like you said, he was a quarterback, middle linebacker coming out of high school.
And I think you're going to see him, like everything really come together for him athletically and technically this year. And I think he's going to take a step. So I think the floor of the room, because of what they went through and the guys that had to perform, and they did perform admirably. But I think they're just going to be better. I think Burnham's going to be better. Tuilamaka is going to be better. And you add in, we're not even talking about, we don't really expect to see a kid like Chris Burgess or Dominic Hulak. You'll see more of their impact probably on special teams.
And next season. Yeah,
and next season. But I mean, heck, if injuries come and one of them gets a shot, they go in and they do what they have to do. But I think it's going to be very difficult, Brian. I will say this for this defensive line collectively. Riley Mills getting hurt, I don't care what anybody says, Riley Mills getting hurt allowed offensive coordinators to exhale.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. It allowed them to put a game plan together saying, we don't have to worry about that dude, right? So you might not have a Riley Mills, but just from a consistency standpoint, I don't think, barring just injuries equal to last year, I don't think you can look at this defensive line, unit 1, unit 2, however you want to break it down, whoever's coming in, that combination is going to be able to get the job done, whether it's stopping the run or applying pressure in the pass game. Yep. I think they're going to have consistency in all of the groups they put out there, even if you start talking in passing situations. We saw Preston Zinter come off the edge in the blue and gold game. KVA is going to be brought off the edge and is going to improve as a pass rusher. What they're going to be able to do as a defensive line, I think they're going to have great consistency and little drop off. I think that's something that you trade for not having that high end guy like Riley Mills. If you could trade that to have consistency throughout from a depth standpoint, you rock and roll with that. And then I didn't even mention Logan Thomas, which you saw how he was in special teams. Him and Bryce Young in special teams. If they bring that athleticism with technicality and learning the position, I expect this pass rush. You talked me off the ledge. because I thought it might be a problem area. And I was basing it based upon the Penn State game and then the Ohio State game.
Sure.
But really just looking at it big picture and being objective about it, I do think it ended up being one of the strengths of the team.
Because, I mean, you didn't have your best pass rusher in that game.
Yeah.
You didn't. You know, Logan Thomas was a 205-pound true freshman. Josh Burnham was in his first full season playing defensive line. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things. Bryce Young was a true freshman. He's now 25 pounds bigger. And so I also think they're better prepared to handle injuries for those reasons this year as well. You know, obviously Patel will come back at some point in time later in the year, and I think he'll give you a pass rush whenever he returns. Special K in the chat keeps talking about Jalen Snead, and I understand where you're coming from. And his comment is, he goes, I think Snead might lead the team in pressures and sacks. That would concern me. That would concern me. And it's has nothing to do with Jalen Snead at all. It has to do with, if your leader in sacks and pressures is a guy who only rushes the quarterback on third down, that means your D-line's not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback on a consistent basis. That's a problem. It's not even a pushback on Special K thinking that Jalen Snead can be a really good pass rusher. It's not that at all. But look, Notre Dame has the number 2 title odds on FanDuel to win it, to go undefeated, I should say, and top 10 title odds. If that's going to happen, they need guys up front to be able to get after the quarterback. Because when you've got to blitz somebody on third down, that means somebody from the secondary has to protect them. And that's when you expose yourself to bigger play opportunities like we saw in that 3rd and 11. I'd much rather go cover 2, over the top, jam Jeremiah Smith off the line, help him over the top, and then say, hey, Boubacar, Burnham, and Jalen Snead, get after it. But if it's just Jalen Snead, who's barely 230 pounds, that's not where you want to be. You're going to need somebody up front, at least one guy up front, to be that guy, to where on that third down play, they're setting their protection to where Boubacar is, or to where Bryce is, or to where Burnham is, that type of thing. And then what that does, Sean, is if that's where they are, now all of a sudden that creates better one-on-one opportunities for a Jalen Snead. You know, for a Drake Bowen on a blitz, for a secondary pass rusher. You know, if they're setting their pressure to Boubacar, good luck blocking Bryce or Burnham or Logan Thomas. That's why I think you need that guy to step up front. But if you want to keep focusing on Jalen Snead, that's fine, but that's one down that you're bringing Jalen Snead. If he's leading your team in sacks and pressures, that means your D-line's not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback in first and second down. That's a problem. That's a major problem. That's why it's got to be an edge guy, that at least one edge guy that's got to really step up and take his game to that level. And if they do that, then the second level pressures, the nickel pressures, become way more impactful because you have to focus so much on stopping that front. That's where I'm coming from. And
I actually made a prediction. I actually said 2 guys on the defensive line would get over 5 sacks.
Oh, I definitely think it'll a defensive end or defensive line.
Defensive end.
Defensive end, yeah, I agree with that. And now, could Jalen Snead lead the defense in hits and sacks, or hits, sacks, and pressures on a per snap, like a per pass rush basis? Sure. Yeah. But ideally, he's not rushing the quarterback as much as those other 2 guys are, or those edge players are, because they got to do it on first and second down. So that's where, that's where I would say I want to see them take their game to another level this season. They got to have that. I think that's the difference in being you a pretty good defense that can get you to the show, or a defense that can win it. We saw last year the defense was good enough to get them to the big game, but it wasn't good enough in that game to stop a team like Ohio State. Just wasn't. Now, there's a lot of reasons why, but whatever the reasons, that's what was the reality. That's got to step up in this instance.
It's a great point by you, just looking at it, just being fair. A very opportunistic defense, a very solid defense that had a strength in particular on the back end and was really talented in the middle. But, they couldn't really play to their capabilities, particularly in the middle of the defense, because of some of the deficiencies that were brought along by injuries and other things up front. And so you look for all of that. Once again, collaborative. It goes back to what we talked about, offense. All three levels working together and just complementing each other and helping each other play at an elite level. That, if they can do that, I think they can really become that championship defense that you're talking about.
Sean, let's go to, we kind of handled the front two levels, or the front level. We're going to skip the second level because I look, I expect, like, Kingston's one of my potential breakout players. Jaden Osborne could be a breakout player. Jalen C could be a breakout player. People could make a case that Drake Bowen's going to become a breakout from a really good player, which what he was most of last year, to a star. That's all fine. They don't need it. If the linebackers simply are just a more experienced, which means more like less mistakes version of last year, Notre Dame's got an outstanding linebacker room. If they just get last year's guys that make fewer mistakes, that's it. Not an ounce better outside of make fewer mistakes. They're fine. The point is, this is a show about who they need to break out. I don't think they need any of the linebackers to be anything better than just more disciplined versions of what they were last year. Agree with that? All right. So now let's go to the third level. And this is where I think you can make a case for a couple of guys that they need to take steps. I'm going to kick things off with Bronte Johnson. And now I actually think that multiple DB safeties need to step up opposite of Don Schuler, because you need a starter, you need rotation guys, you need all that. So you could talk about Luke Talent, you could talk about Jadon Blair also needing to step up, but a guy that I think has a chance to be that huge difference maker is Tay Johnson. Like, I think when you look at Tay, you look at a guy that, look, this is an intel piece that was out before camp started, so I'm going to give a little nugget from it, and this is why you should be on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, because you would have seen this the night before camp started. I put out an intel piece where I talked to a source close to the program, and they said to me that we think that Tay has ball skills like Xavier Watts. And I was like, seriously? And they're like, yes. So put that in the intel piece, Sean, and it's out there. And first practice, we go out there and Tay picks off 2 passes. Both rangy, instinctive plays. I know you're going to talk about Adon, and because you and I have talked about what you're going to say, and I agree with it. But no matter how much better Adon gets, I don't think he's the same kind of player as Xavier Watts for 2 reasons: stylistically, but also the boundary safety is different in pass coverage than what they ask of the field safety. And if you get a guy like Tay Johnson that can do with any kind of consistency what he did in practice on day 1, and I don't mean pick off 2 passes, I just mean be around the ball, be where you're supposed to be athletic, do all those things. He's the guy that has a chance to this year become a breakout star, similar to what Adon did last year, if not maybe even a little bit more productive as a redshirt freshman. And of the options, I think it's more likely that he breaks out to become that kind of player, with then Jadon becoming a really good part of the rotation as a true freshman, as opposed to Jadon becoming a star as a true freshman. But I think you need Tay to have that breakout. I think him stepping up and being that difference maker, or being a difference maker on the ball, is the difference between Notre Dame having a really good secondary and an elite secondary, especially at safety. And I think Tay Johnson can have that type of impact in the pass game. And then you need somebody as part of that rotation, whether it's Luke Talich, whether it's Jalen Stroman, whether it's Jadon Blair, I don't care if it's Ethan Long, I don't care who it is, somebody else needs to step up as that third or fourth safety to provide great depth. So there's a breakout needed from everybody not named Adon Schuler, in my view. And I'm because I'm looking at it differently. You're going to talk about Adon here in a second. But somebody needs to take an even bigger step. And I think Tay is the guy with the tools to do that. And so if he breaks out, it's just going to be on a different level than if Luke or Jalen or another returner breaks out. I just think he's got that kind of talent. I mean, Sean Adams is a top 100 recruit with 5-star upside. Like, he hasn't done anything. I mean, when they needed a corner last year, they moved Tay to corner, and he looked pretty good when he was doing it in mop-up minutes late in games. So I think he's got a chance to be a special player. I don't need him to be that necessarily this year, but the closer he gets to that and breaks out, the better this secondary is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think for me, talking about Adon Schuler, I make the correlation not in talent or not in position, but in leadership, right? We talked about transition and the standard of the room, the standard of the position, how you lead, how you play. I think that's something that Xavier Watts, and I think Adon Schuler said it multiple times last year when people were talking about how well he's played as a first-time starter. He's like, man, I'm playing next to this guy. Speaking of Xavier Watts and learning from him makes it a whole lot easier to play and make plays. And so now he has to be that for those guys that you just talked about. Those young guys have to be able to look to him. He has to be the anchor. He has to be the extension of Mike Mickens on the field and the extension of Chris Ash on the field. He has to be the one, as Marcus Freeman spoke about Xavier Watts, he's always in the right place for us on every play. Adon Schuler, like he said, they play a different position. He has to be the guy to show everybody, like, yo, this is your job. Always be in the right spot. Whatever is asked of him, if he can do that, you know he's going to come downhill. You know he's going to hit. You know he's going to be physical. And you know he's going to make plays because he showed the knack for making plays and creating turnovers last year. I expect that to take another step. But I think from a leadership standpoint, filling that void of who Xavier Watts was for that defense, he doesn't have to be Xavier Watts because he's not Xavier Watts. But he has to be that type of presence and leader on the back end to go ahead and help facilitate what you spoke about with Bronte and the other youngsters at the safety position being able to break out.
I think that point is because I would say as a player that he's no different than the linebackers in that I just need you to be a little bit more disciplined version of what you were last year. Solid in coverage and man, pretty good in zone, really good coming down against the run, but he was prone to young guy mistakes. He'd go out of control. He'd take a bad angle. Like those are areas where if he just cleans that up, he's a heck of a player. To your point, where he needs to be a breakout is what he provides the room from a leadership, setting the example, setting the tone, getting people lined up, making sure that everyone knows what's going on. When there's a motion, making sure that if your nickel's making a call, he's making the right call, things like that. I think that's an invaluable piece of what Adon's going to have to bring this year. That's going to go way beyond whatever he does production-wise. I think that's absolutely a great example, Sean. I think we could also make a case for Christian Gray in this scenario because I just don't know if I need him to break out. I want to get your thoughts on this. I think Christian Gray had a very interesting year in 2024. There were times he was outstanding, and there were times he struggled. The times he struggled were usually moments within a game, not for an entire game. The one example being the game against USC. I think he struggled for a chunk of that game. Ohio State, I could show you some really good coverage snaps from that game from him. Just had a couple bad ones. And well, really just the one. I don't fault him for the play where Ohio State ran that motion reverse. There just was bad communication all around on that play. But what I do think they need is minimum what I said about Adon Schuler and the linebackers. I just need you to be consistently the best version of yourself. When you look around college football this year, Sean, and the teams in Notre Dame is going to have to beat to win a title, do you think that even more is needed from Christian? Or do you think it can just be I just need you to be what you are 75% of the time, 90% of the time? Or do you think it's more of No. I need you to really raise your overall level of play. Does that make sense? Like, what I mean is 75% of the time last year, Christian was really good. I need him to be that guy 90% of the time, 95% of the time, meaning fewer mistakes. Don't be so grabby when you're in great position. Like things like that. I don't think he needs to elevate his game all around. It's just, dude, be more consistent. So I put him on the same level as I do the Drake Bowens and the Kingstons and the Jaden Alsburys and the Adon Schulers, where I don't need a breakout per se. I think more consistency just naturally does that, where it's not so much a you're here, now you got to go here, like we're talking about from other guys. I think, dude, you're here most of the time. I just need you to stop being here for 15% of the time, 20% of the time. Or what do you think, Sean? Or do you think a breakout's actually needed?
I think two things. I do think that some of his struggle comes from the fact that he is extreme. He studies the game. And I think that's something as a coach. You know how you come in and guys think they know what studying is?
Yes. Can you,
You know
Sean, can you do me a favor right there?
Yeah.
Can you now share, you don't have to say who told you that, but can you now share what you were told going into last season about Christian? Because I think it fits really well with because I remember when you told me it was later at night and I was taking the trash. I remember you having that conversation, who we were talking about. Yeah. But can you share that story? Because I think it fits perfectly into what you're saying right now about Christian.
Yeah, it was a conversation with Benjamin Morrison's dad. And Benjamin Morrison's dad pretty much was like, yo, Christian he's more talented than Ben. He's just not as technical. And he doesn't work as hard as Ben, but he'll learn. And that's what I was getting to. You can come in and you can think you know what film work is, what film study is, but there's another level to it, right? And Christian, I think, had to learn that lesson the hard way with some unfortunate big plays made against him later in the season, right? And what I mean by that is he studies, and in his studying, he can gamble a lot because he trusts in what he sees. If you know, Christian is always talking to everybody else pre-snap about what he sees. He's looking at the way this guy has this foot up, this receiver has this foot up. He's always looking at on the play you mentioned against Ohio State. He's the one trying to get everybody else's attention to say, hey, something going on. He's looking at Jeremiah Smith saying something's going on here. I see it. And no one else caught his attention, but that's just Chip Kelly knowing they're going to be in man and we can use this against them, which goes to my next point. I think the benefit that Chris Ash can give to Christian Gray and Leonard Moore is to give them the ability to disguise, to be up as if they're going to bump and run, but be in cover 3 or drop late or do different things that can give them the ability and help them be even better and more efficient at what they do. We know for the vast majority of the snaps, if you just let them line up man to man, they're going to have good snaps. But it's always those 1 or 2 snaps per game that everybody wants to point out and highlight. And like you said, what about the other 85, 90% of the snaps or passes where he did a great job in coverage? And so I think the ability to be more multiple, which is going to help with their development, with their desire to go to the next level. And he likes to play. We always question, like, should he play more bump and run or does he like to play more off? Yeah. And I think because he did gamble a lot, he would get caught off in off-man coverage, which that was the one thing I didn't like about the play against Ohio State.
Right.
Like,
he should have been bumping and running on.
Just let him bump and run.
Right.
Let him bump and run. The moment you put him in off coverage in that position, he has to worry about the slant or in breaking route, and he has to worry about
that. To your point, is why mixing up some zone is good, because Christian is really good playing off-man coverage against quick game and intermediate game because he's really smart and instinctive. That's why he was driving on balls. Where Christian gets in trouble is when he's got to flip his hips on vertical stuff in off man, which is exactly what got him beat against USC, and it's what got him beat against Ohio State. He's got to improve in that area, first of all.
But that goes to the technical part of the game.
Right.
Which Mr. Morrison was talking about. Like once he locks in and hones in on his craft.
Now, keep in mind, Benjamin Morrison's dad is not just some dad who's evaluating his own son. Benjamin Morrison's dad, I believe, was an all Pac-12 defensive back and played in the NFL as a safety. So that's why it has a little bit more credibility for him to say that about a killer. And he wasn't saying Christian doesn't work. He was saying Christian doesn't work like Benjamin. Point being, if Christian can then work like Benjamin, he could be a great player. I'll say this, Sean. There's not a player on this roster who has a greater disparity between what the fans think of him and what the coaching staff thinks of him than Christian Gray. Because going into spring, we had people like, do you think so-and-so might beat out Christian Gray? And I'm thinking, no. Like, no. I said that to a Notre Dame coach and literally started laughing. Just like literally started laughing. Like, people actually think that? Like, do they not watch film? So we got to understand, and it made sense to him when I said that. So you got to understand, most fans are watching the game from television. So the only time you really see a corner is when he's picking a ball off or getting beat. That's usually the only time you notice a corner is then. Because, like, even if it's an incompletion, they kind of go away from it pretty quickly. And it's like, that makes sense. But what they think about him inside the program is so much different than what fans think of him. And Troy Pride was like that as well, where Troy had he was very highly thought of in the program by the coaches, but fans, like, for whatever reason, just, had that feeling of him. But like Christian Gray, if you study the film, is really good most of the time. It's just, as a young player, it's like that with Drake Bowen in Kingston last year. When they made mistakes, they were usually like big ones that we all saw. Kingston not running with that seam route against Northern Illinois and getting beat for an 85-yard touchdown. Kingston closing in and not recognizing read zone, and Tyler Shuck pulls it out the backside and runs for 50. I mean, Drake getting beat on a wheel route. It was plays like that, and they were noticeable. But then you watch the other 85, 90+% of the plays, you're like, these guys are really good. It's cleaning up those plays where the mistakes are with a lot of these guys. But Christian's all fits into that as well. And they were all fresh. All those guys we're talking about were freshmen and sophomores last year. Think about that.
Yeah.
They're all freshmen and sophomores. And now it's about cleaning that up and taking it to another level.
Something else, I equate it to Dennis Johnson. I was going to use somebody else, but I know you're a Celtics fan.
Oh, you're talking about DJ, the great one. Okay, there we go.
DJ always had the assignment to stick Mike. Right? Famous story. That famous series where you see Larry Bird refer to Michael Jordan as God. Game one of that series, Michael Jordan has like 30-some points. The Bulls get blown out. He goes and plays golf with Danny Ainge and a couple of Boston Celtics the next day. And he tells Danny Ainge, hey, tell DJ to be ready tomorrow. And that's when he came into the Garden and scored 63. Like, are you going to sit here and say DJ's a horrible defender? No, that dude is just different.
Right.
He's just different. And sometimes other good players make plays.
Yeah.
That catch the Indiana.
That was ridiculous. He literally caught it with his kneecaps.
Yes. Christian Gray is right there. He's literally right there with his hand.
But because of the USC game,
yes,
it was viewed, oh, well,
yeah.
It's because of this, it's because of that, right?
Yeah. And DJ was a great defender. Dennis Johnson was a great defender. But that's just a great play by a great player. But I will say this. Who made the big time stop on fourth down against Texas A&M? Who made that big play when USC was trying to tie the game up? Who made the big play against Penn State? And then you can say what you want to say. For every play that you want to highlight is, oh, man, he has a list of big plays last season that he made as well. So, yeah, it's a little bit out over your skis to be sitting here talking about who's going to beat out Christian Gray.
It's just sometimes, Sean, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're just not going to be able to cover that guy. I mean, Larry Bird has said before, best guy that ever defended me is Michael Cooper. There's plenty of games where Larry Bird lit Michael Cooper up in the finals. But it's not about it. But of all the people that have guarded me, this guy is the best at it. But, it's like the one that's similar to me as a Celtics fan. You talk about the Bulls fan game. The Celtics swept that series, by the way. I like to point out that the Bulls never beat the Celtics when Larry Bird was still playing, when the big three was together. It's just a different story for a different day. But the game where Bird went for 60 against the Hawks, and Doc Rivers I guarded him, Dominique guarded him. I mean, it just didn't matter who you put on him. It's not that those guys couldn't play defenses that night. When a great player gets hot, there's just nothing you can do about it. I've seen that. I mean, Michael Jordan was one of the best defensive guards I've ever seen in the NBA. People don't talk about that enough. He was an elite defensive player. Did you watch what Bubba Chuck did to him a couple times? You know what I mean? And when a great player, I don't care who you are, when a great player is going off, sometimes you're going to get beat. For Christian, it's about limiting those times, being more competitive, and getting to that point. So I would say that if he does have a breakout, I think it makes the secondary really, really scary. But I would still say if I could only pick Christian just being more consistent and a breakout coming from Tay, I'll go with that, because I still think Christian was already still pretty good most of the time anyway.
Yeah.
But one of my bold predictions, Sean, was that Christian Gray is not on the team next year.
Ooh,
that was one of my bold predictions for the Corners, because meaning he has a big year, and it's
he has to go.
Yeah, Dane Brugler released his looking at the 2026 draft. Somebody put on the message board, but Dane Brugler broke down his top 5 draft eligible corners at The Athletic today. But then he ranked the top 25 seniors, and then he ranked the top 15 draft eligible underclassmen, and he had Christian Gray 4th. Ahead of A.J. Harris, ahead of Malik Muhammad, ahead of D'Angelo Pons, ahead of Jermaine Matthews, ahead of Jalen Kilgore, ahead of some pretty good players.
Yeah.
So, the talent is there. It's just about being more consistent with it. And if he is more consistent with it, I think he can have the kind of season where you look back and say, why is he leaving after his junior year? And well, because he's got 32 career starts, which is 3 seasons for a lot of people. Yeah. And he's turned into an elite cornerback. So I think he's got that kind of tool. So, Sean, that's going to do it for the defensive part of this show. Is there anybody else you wanted to mention before we move on to our final portion of the show?
No, I think I did mention, I do think, because I expect Christian Gray and Leonard Moore to be elite, I think that nickel position is going to be key. Devontae Smith, Carson Hobbs. I think if they can be locked down, whether it's in, nickel or other sub situations, if they can be locked down on the interior of the defense against the pass, which from what we've seen in the spring and the short time that you guys gave a report, I think in the that's not shade. I'm just saying the one full practice that was
you're good.
that we were able to see. I do think it looks good, because I think that's going to be a premium position, because offensive coordinators are going to be trying to find where can we attack this defense, and more than likely they're going to look at that nickel position and inside the hashes.
So before we move on, Guns N' Roses said no special teams breakout for Vince. What's funny is Sean asked me that question beforehand. Do you want to talk about any special? I said, no, not really, because I'm adopting the loose emoji view on special teams this year. I don't need anybody to be a star. Just do your job. Just don't make big mistakes. Just make your kicks, do your punts, be consistent as a punter, be good in coverage. I don't need a bunch of long returns. If somebody does, that's great, but I don't think they need it. I think special teams is just don't get the team beat on special teams. That's honestly all I care about because I think they're so good on all phases. Just don't give the game-changing plays for the other team on special teams. Missed field goals, blocked kicks, big returns, muffed punts, things like that. Don't give opponents those things, and I think it'll be.
Speaking of that, though, low key, low key, I do think James Rendell has a chance to be special. When
Yeah.
they just finally let him
Yeah.
kick instead of trying to be tricky and do little things.
Well, I don't think they're going to let him just kick, number one. I think they're going to still do that other crap. I think there's a couple returners that could be special.
Yeah.
My point is, I don't think they need it for this team to be an elite championship team.
It won't hurt.
No, it doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt.
It won't hurt at all.
It doesn't hurt if Drake Bowen has a breakout. It doesn't hurt if Kingston has a breakout. It doesn't hurt if, Jeremiah Love has another. It won't hurt. It's just they don't need it, is why I went there. But we did bring it up. We did bring it up and show a little bit of love for Vince and Guns and Roses. So we'll get there for you guys. So we got a little something, but that's going to wrap up the Notre Dame team section. We're going to get into some Heisman conversation in the next part of the show. But before we do, folks, hit that. If you haven't already done so, hit that like button for us. If you've already done it, don't do it because then it unlikes it. We want you to keep that like on. So go ahead and hit that like button for us. We'd greatly appreciate it as we wrap up part 2 of today's Irish Breakdown podcast. Sean, number 3 today, topic number 3, our college football topic here on this Irish Breakdown brought to you by FanDuel show is the Heisman Trophy. And you and I are going to have some fun talking about Heisman Trophy candidates this year. And we're going to break down the perceived top players. We're going to bring up the FanDuel odds for winning the Heisman Trophy, go through them. We have some sleeper picks. We're going to talk a little bit of Notre Dame here. But the interesting thing before we get started about the Heisman Trophy race this year, Sean, is although I believe there are some perceived media picks, I actually don't think we're going into the season with actually real front runners because the guys that are perceived as front, at least the one guy that's perceived as the front runner by a lot of people is someone who I think needs to show a lot before that's real. And so I don't know that there is a surefire, oh, yes, this guy is going to be a Heisman Trophy contender like we've seen in some past seasons because there are so many quarterbacks are new for top teams. Because at the end of the day, you and I both know this is still very much a quarterback-driven award and a quarterback for top teams. Last year was an anomaly season. You need to be a top 10 team, and your quarterback needs to be putting up numbers. That's really ultimately where the winners come from. And I don't know that there's enough of the returners that I feel good enough about their ceilings to say that, oh yeah, that guy for sure. So that's my first general takeaway before we get into the specifics of these players. What are your thoughts on the Heisman race for this season, Sean, as we kind of handicap it here before the season starts?
Well, to go to your point, if you go over to FanDuel and you ask the question, who is the best chance to win the Heisman on Notre Dame's team? I think everyone would raise their hand and say, ooh, like Arnold Horshack. I know. And they would utter Jeremiah Love.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go over to FanDuel, Jeremiah Love is at plus 4,000 to win the Heisman. And the Notre Dame quarterback, CJ Carr, is at plus 3,100. That's 31-1. So that goes to show you that it's always slanted towards the quarterback. Even FanDuel thinks it's slanted towards the quarterback. And you look here at the odds, and of course, the first player that's not a quarterback, of course, you see Jeremiah Smith, and he's just so dynamic. You have to put him in the top 5. But there are some quarterbacks here that I just really question whether or not they're legitimate Heisman Trophy.
And we'll go through those individually, but to your point, Sean, this is a very quarterback. Now, just so you're clear, CJ Carr and Jeremiah Love are not 11th and 12th in Heisman Trophy. This is a graphic that we got made for us, and there's a couple guys that we'll talk about that are on this, but it's just kind of throwing in the Notre Dame guys at the end to kind of show those odds. But I thought it was fascinating to your point that CJ Carr is actually Notre Dame's top Heisman Trophy candidate from a betting odds standpoint, because it speaks to, and I know Reggie talked about this last night on your guys' show, which is and we've said it for years, it's a quarterback dominant award. It's not only for quarterbacks, as Travis Hunter showed last season, but it's primarily a quarterback driven award. And one of the things we were talking about before the show is it's been that way a long time, which is why Gino Torretta won the award over Marshall Faulk in 1992, the year that Reggie finished 5th. Like, if that year doesn't show it, and 1990 doesn't show it, when Ty Detmer got it over Rocket Ismail, then I don't really know what to tell you. So it's that's just the reality of it. That's where the Heisman Trophy is. Now, I'll tell you this, if CJ Carr finishes the year in the top 10 of voting for the Heisman Trophy, then Notre Dame's going to have a really, really, really good season, and we're going to have a lot of fun. But let's just kind of go through this, Sean, top to bottom. We'll just talk. We'll give our thoughts on the player and the Heisman Trophy, dive into that, and then we'll have a couple sleepers for you at the end. And then something to be thinking about, Sean, is let's give a non-quarterback that's not on this list. Let's give recognition to one of those of someone who we think could be on it as well. So let's start with number 1, Arch Manning. And I see this. This is obviously the FanDuel betting odds for the Heisman Trophy. And Arch Manning's the top on a lot of people. And I think if we can just be honest about it, Sean, he's there for one reason and one reason only, and his last name is Manning. And I don't mean that in any type of disrespect to Arch Manning. I think Arch Manning's a very good player. But if his name was Arch Jones and he was, his dad drove a UPS truck and he was just a heck of a player, and I think Arch Manning's a heck of a player, he might be in the top 10 because he's going to be at Texas, but he's not number 1. I think we can be honest about that. This is about him being a Manning. He could end up winning it. Again, this is in no way shade at Arch Manning. This is more about shade at the people that are just anointing him as opposed to letting him earn it, which I think Arch wants to earn it. But that's the only reason. That and the fact that there aren't any truly elite quarterbacks coming back. And Cade Klubnik's a good player, but he's not that. But that's the only reason Arch Manning, in my opinion, is number 1. Thoughts?
Ready, man. I'm sorry. I thought you were ready to rock and roll.
No, I am. I want to hear your thoughts on Arch Manning.
Arch, for me, and I'll just expand this. I do think that's a darn good team that's going to be undefeated or one loss, in my opinion. Anytime you lead the way as the quarterback of a team that has that much success, he has the talent. That young wide receiving core is really good.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna.
The tight end they got from Cal, Jack Enders, is a pretty good player. Yeah,
he's gonna put up numbers. Yeah, I'm not sitting here talking about how good he really is as a prospect quarterback, but he's surrounded in a great position with one of the best play callers. To pretty much, I think he's going to produce more in that offense than his predecessor. That's my opinion. I think he'll put up better numbers than his predecessor.
I think the dual threat aspect he'll bring to the offense also, because what doesn't get talked enough about with Arch is a pretty good athlete.
Yeah, he is.
And everybody talks
they
about
would bring him in
talent.
and run situations. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, last year Arch was 4th on the team in rushing with 108 yards on 25 carries, 4 touchdowns, which tied for 3rd on the team.
Yeah.
And that was bringing him into those situations. I absolutely believe that you put him in as the starter, as a scrambler, and doing some other things, he's going to produce. I think he is. I'm fine with putting Texas as starting quarterback in the top 10. Totally fine with that.
Yeah,
it's putting him 1 that is my issue when he hasn't proven it.
Why do you think
going into next
season? It's strictly the name.
It's his name.
Okay.
Now the other factors, if he was Arch Manning starting quarterback at Tulane, I don't think he'd be number 1. The other things are factors, but the fact is his name's Arch Manning. And if he wasn't Arch Manning, like I said, if he's Arch Jones, then I don't think he's number 1. I think he's in the top 10 because he's talented. He's a worker. From everyone you talk to, Arch works. He does have one of the best play callers in the business calling plays for him in a system that's very quarterback friendly, and he does have a good supporting cast. My concern for him is the offensive line. How well does that hold up? And so that's kind of where I'm at with this, Sean, is I need to see that from him before, like, I'm ready to say, oh yeah, I'm thinking he is the leader in the clubhouse going into the season. That's more of my issue with it. Is you want to talk about Arch? I'm expecting big things from Arch Manning this year. Good. So is anybody else that follows football. The kid's a talented player. It's taken it. It's what gets him to the top of this conversation in my opinion, is the fact that his last name is Manning. And somebody said in the chat, nobody except bettors is putting him number one. That's not true, because I got Lindy's preseason magazine right here, and look who they got number one. Arch Manning. This isn't just some betting thing. This is what a lot of people are doing. And I think he's in there. I don't think he's number one. At the same time, I don't know that I could tell you definitively this is who should be number one, because I don't think the best player coming back in college football is going to have the best odds to win the Heisman, because it is such a quarterback-driven award, and that would be Jeremiah Smith. Next two quarterbacks are tied, Sean. Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier plus 900. What's interesting about this one is these two guys kick off in week one of the season. We're going to see Clemson and LSU week one in, according to Brian Kelly, Death Valley Junior, in a what is going to be a huge game for both teams, Sean. So you're talking about guys winning a Heisman Trophy. That's a great opportunity. Looking at FanDuel, Clemson is a 3.5-point favorite right now. This is an opportunity, in my opinion, and it's one of two games in which Cade Klubnik is going against another top 10 Heisman candidate, because he also this season will square off against South Carolina and Lenore Sellers. But this is a game where one of these two is going to have a chance to then immediately jump himself into the top of this conversation, and the other guy potentially could slide down a little bit in that opening week matchup. I would say that Garrett Nussmeier has the greater opportunity to make a big jump, because if his team wins and he plays well, you did it on the road. Whereas with Cade, it would be big for him to outplay Garrett Nussmeier and win that game. But I think with them being the head favorite, being at home, I think you could see Nussmeier be the one that could get the even bigger jump if he can come out and set the tone with a big first game. But either way, it's important for both of them to play well, because I think Heisman Trophy is not always decided by head-to-head matchups. But when there are those head-to-head matchups, they can swing people, in my opinion. Well, who played well? Who played best in that game when they went against each other? And I think it could have a factor.
I think this game is bigger for Brian Kelly at LSU. You talk about 3.5. I would take Clemson to win this game, but I would take the under. I think the 57.5 is a little bit high in the first game, because I do think I think the LSU defense will be improved, and I think this Clemson defense is definitely about to recover from the disappointment, especially in the front seven from last year. So 57.5, that's a lot of points for this game. But I do expect Clemson to win the game, and I probably would take the under over at FanDuel. This is bigger for Garrett Nussmeier and his Heisman hopeful, because he needs this. This would be a signature win that he would need, because they still have to go back to that difficult SEC schedule. If Clemson loses this game, they still rattle off wins in the ACC, in my opinion, and make it to the playoff as the ACC champion. That's the way I see it. And he has a
shot left against Lenore Sellers later in the season.
Absolutely, he does on the national landscape at the end of the season, right before the Heisman Trophy is given out. So you're absolutely right. He has more opportunities.
Maybe there's a chance, Sean, depending on how the season goes, that at the end of the year, it's back-to-back games against Lenore Sellers in South Carolina, and then ACC title game against Carson Beck in Miami. To speak to your point. So I agree with you. I don't know that Cade gets the bump if Clemson wins, unless he's just lights out. I mean, 320, 4 touchdowns, just rips LSU apart, which I don't think is going to happen, because I do think LSU has an improved defense this year. I do. I think he could play well, but not like the kind of performance where you're like, holy cow, like Jack Cohn had against Florida State in the opener in 2021. You know, like those for 360 and 4 touchdowns and that kind of thing. So highest player on their odds to win the Heisman that's not a quarterback is next, and Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. It's going to be tough, in my opinion, for him to be a legitimate contender for this award because of a couple factors. Number one, first-year starting quarterback. Will they allow him to throw as much? I don't know the answer to that. The other part of it, too, is there's some other weapons at Ohio State. But do they view early on Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis the same way they did Emeka Egbuka? Meaning will teams kind of take a lot of teams are going to watch how Texas defended him, and then they're going to watch how Notre Dame defended him. And Notre Dame thought, hey, we got good corners. We can match up against you. And honestly, for most of the game, they did a pretty good job against Jeremiah Smith. But then he made that big play at the end where Texas just said, we're going to put all of our coverage to stopping him and make somebody else beat us. I think there's a chance you could see some of that to where maybe Jeremiah doesn't have the monster numbers that people think he's going to have. But he's still having a huge impact because his brilliance is forcing teams to put so much more attention on him that then Carnell puts up numbers. Max Clare puts up numbers. And then I think you're going to get some scrambling from the quarterback. So I could see that being a scenario where Jeremiah doesn't finish as high as we think because of that. But if he does have a Devontae Smith type season, then I think he has the best chance of the non-quarterbacks to win the Heisman this season.
What's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking about the situation that both teams are in the national championship. They went to the portal to get a guy to lead them to the national championship with the hopes of winning it, knowing that they were going to have a young man, more than likely, that was in their system for 2 years, starting for the first time the following year. And so when you talk about Jeremiah Smith, I wonder, with Julian saying, if he ends up being the starter, as most people expect right about now, is he going to be that guy that forces the ball to Jeremiah Smith? Mm-hmm. Or does he have a comfort level from working with the other receivers in practice that will lend itself to allowing Jeremiah Smith impact to have more range? Mm-hmm. I think because he has already worked with receivers, scout team, second team reps, he probably has a relationship with the Brandon Ennis's who came on later and some of the other big-time receivers that they've recruited. I think that could help out as well. Will Possible. It help Jeremiah Smith's numbers to be Heisman worthy? Probably not. But, if he has less receptions but increases his yards per catch and touchdowns, maybe he sneaks in, especially if he goes off against Texas. If he goes off against Texas, he
all bets are off. He's in it.
Yeah,
that's right, 100%.
Yeah,
and what makes that interesting is the last time Texas was on the field, they were playing Ohio State and they were shutting Jeremiah Smith down. I think he had one catch for 4 yards because their whole game plan was we're not going to let him score. Does he have a little bit of extra something? Does Ryan Day have a little bit of extra something saying, yeah, we're going to do some things to get Jeremiah free? Are we going to move him around? Are we going to motion him? Are we going to allow him to not just line up in the outside and maybe you do some short motion stack stuff. Maybe you do some stuff where you let him travel across the field and get into some sort of bunch type of looks to say, hey, you're going to have to make some decisions post snap on him. I could see that. And then does that then allow them, to your point, to have that monster first game? Because if he has that monster first game, then I don't know a lot of teams left on the schedule the next few weeks that are going to be able to kind of keep him in check the way that you are going to need to keep him in check to keep his numbers. So I think that's a good point. He's another guy that has a great shot in the week one. And we didn't talk about this with Arch, but Arch is going to have a chance. Arch's first game is going to either announce him as a legitimate contender or say, guys, he's going to be okay, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. Let's let him develop like he would be allowed to develop if his name wasn't Manning. That's the other thing is, unfortunately, it's like I said with Deion Sanders a couple years ago, Sean, on this very show. I said, the reason Deion is getting as much hype as he is right now in talk is because people want to build him up so that if there's failure, they can tear him down. So then they can make their money off of the rise, and then they can make their money off of the fall. And I think that's what's happening with Arch. Is, look, we're going to hype him up, and if he plays well, we'll just keep hyping him up. If he doesn't play well, then we have all this ammunition built up to tear him down. Flat out think that's what's a part of.
I'm going to be honest, too. For a lot of people, there is no excuse. You've had time.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't put you out there before your time. You should be like a fine wine being open, ready to be consumed. And you should start off very fast. This should not be where a first time starter has to grow and go through growing pains. No, my man, you've been in big time situations against Georgia in certain games. You've been in big time situations down at the goal line against Ohio State in the national in the semifinal. Look, you've all of that, you've gotten that off of you. You know what it feels like. That should be the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to get your feet under you. Sark should be able to give you the play, give you the playbook, and let you rock. It's very interesting. I think he goes into the matchup with Ohio State. Honestly, it goes to your point. It's almost like a setup. It's like, dude, you have the better team.
That's the
You have the
perception.
better team,
Yeah.
and you're going
I don't
against
know
a
that I
first-time
agree with
starter.
that, but that's the perception.
That's the perception, right? And because they have some things to prove as far as like physicality, getting punched in the mouth. But I don't know if Ohio State is exactly that type of matchup that makes you feel like, I don't know if Ryan Day's team is really going to try to bully them. Or I think this is a styles fight that works for Texas, especially if they're going to go athlete for athlete. I think that's something that Texas would like to do. If Ohio State can find a way to kind of just drag them back out to the shed and make it a little bit more physical than Texas might be expecting, then you might see something a little bit different or something detrimental. But I do think the way this game goes, it could be one of those things where a lot of people jump off the bandwagon.
Which is unfortunate because I understand.
It is.
I agree with you because you're not saying you believe that. Let me make sure. You're not saying that's how you feel. You're saying that's the setup for the storylines about how he should be in the opener. And I think that's unfair. If Arch completes 57% of his passes and throws for 235 and a couple touchdowns and a pick and runs for 40 yards and they either win a close game or lose a close game, that's not going to blow anybody away. But I'm like, that's a pretty good first day against a pretty talented defense at the defending national champions on the road in the opener. You know, I agree with you on that one. Next is Ty Simpson. I kind of got a chuckle out of this one, but this is even more egregious, in my opinion, than the CJ Carr ahead of Jeremiah Love thing. Because we've seen receivers win it recently, last year, 2020. But you've got Ty Simpson is having the fifth best quarterback odds or fifth best overall odds, but Ryan Williams is all the way down there with Jeremiah Love at plus 4,000. I just kind of got a little bit of chuckle out of that one. And Sean, I'm very much on I think Alabama bounces back this year thing. I think Ty Simpson is going to be a good player, but now we're getting a little bit carried away by putting him as the fifth best odds. You're telling me that Ty Simpson, who's a nice player, I think he's going to have a good year, has got better Heisman Trophy odds than Lenore Sellers? Really? Even John Mateer? Really? That's the first one where I'm like, come on, y'all. Come on. Let's be serious. So that one, and that's not a knock on Ty Simpson at all. That's just, guys, come on. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that is a connection to what they expect from the head coach and the offensive coordinator and the work they do to develop quarterbacks. Added to the Alabama brand. Maybe that's collectively what brought them to being at 16 plus 1,600. Carson Beck, I get it. Carson Beck is very much in a situation where we discussed this. Carson Beck is almost in a perception savior situation down there at Miami. Like, yo, come in and be that guy that can elevate our program, but I just don't know if it's enough around Carson Beck to help him. And I don't know if Carson Beck is that type of quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know that he's necessarily the kind of elevator you would need to be.
Yeah.
Now, since this graphic was made yesterday, they have slightly adjusted the odds. CJ Carr's up to plus 3,000, and Lenore Sellers now up to plus 1,700. So he has slightly jumped ahead of Carson Beck on that one, which I think is wise, but he should still be. I would actually have Lenore Sellers in my top 5. I would. I just think in a year where there is uncertainty at quarterback, give me the dual threat kid that can make plays with his arms and legs and showed out in some of the bigger games last year. I mean, I thought Cade Klubnik was really good in that battle against South Carolina last year. I thought Cade made some really good throws in that game. In the game South Carolina won, but, Cade Klubnik in that game, Sean, passed for 280 yards and completed 66.7% of his throws. He also rushed for 62 yards and a touchdown. I thought Cade played really well in that game. But Lenore Sellers did too. He passed for 164 yards, ran for 166 yards. They both had 2 touchdowns, like very similar numbers. And Lenore did that on the road. I'd have him a little higher. I don't know that he's going to have the ability to win it all. He's got to prove he can stay healthy for a full season, number one. With his playing style, that's a question mark. And Lenore is going to have to be more consistent as a quarterback because a lot of people remember how good he was against Bama at times. They remember how good he was against Missouri. They remember how good he was against Clemson. But he had some rough moments against Illinois, in my opinion. He had some rough moments against Ole Miss last year. He had some for all the big plays he made against Alabama. He also had some big misses against Alabama. He struggled, I thought, at times in some other games. So, but again, he was a first-year full-time starter. That's going to be part of the process. But I think Lenore, to me, should be in the top 5 when it comes to Heisman Trophy odds. Drew Aller, I think this is his ceiling, Sean. I just don't again, another example of quarterback being the driver for this. You've got Drew Aller at plus 1,800, but then you have, Nicholas Singleton, who I would argue is their best offensive player at plus 30,000. Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton at plus 30,000. I guess the thought being they're going to kind of split each other's carries, I guess, to some degree. But I thought that was pretty comical. Dante Moore, these are a couple others. There's some guys ahead of Dante Moore. This is just a couple.
You know what? From a Heisman standpoint, before we move to Dante, and this is going to fly in the face of what I said about Drew Aller on our last show. I actually think he should be higher.
Drew Aller?
Because I think he's a quarterback for a team that's going to be. Because I'm playing the odds.
Agreed.
I'm playing the odds of how they look at it.
Will be good enough. That's my concern with Drew Aller.
Well,
will his numbers be good enough?
Yes, I agree with that.
That's why I don't think he has a chance.
And I'm just talking about the odds. I think his odds are better than Ty Simpson's, in my opinion. I have more confidence that Penn State is going to be a top 5 team than I do. Alabama's going to have to show me.
Sure.
I know they're talented. I know it's year 2 after, Nick Saban. You have to show me. You have to win some big games and not lose the games you're supposed to win. You have to show me that you can do that, right? Because we saw it in Notre Dame, right? You lose some tough ones the first year. You think you're over that hump. Heck, last year they lose in Northern Illinois. It's a process when you become a new head coach at a big-time program, replacing a successful head coach. So
get that. That part, Sean, I don't have a huge problem or a huge disagreement with. I'm higher on Alabama than you, but I think it's fair. You got to show me. The reason I still say I'll take Ty Simpson is because I do think Ty Simpson's a better fit for that system. It comes down to production. Yes, you've got to be a starting quarterback for a highly ranked team, but you have to have some level of production. And last year in the regular season plus the Big Ten title game, Drew Aller only passed for 2,894 yards and 21 touchdowns. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't have a bunch of rushing numbers you can point to say, hey, this is why he should be in there because of the running numbers. I mean, he was less than 300 yards and 7 touchdowns. So it comes down to you have to produce as well. And I don't know that system with 2,000-yard running backs is going to allow him to put up the kind of production that he would need, whereas a passing quarterback in a Kalen DeBoer offense is absolutely going to put up the numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas Kalen, if let's say Bama's ranked 9th at the end of the year and Penn State's ranked second, I would still give Ty Simpson better odds to win the Heisman because his production is going to be significantly greater than that of Drew Aller. Because, I'm a defender of Drew Aller. But when we're talking Heisman, quarterback, top team, there's got to be some level of production, though. This isn't 06 with Troy Smith. There's got to be some production, and I just don't know that. And I think there's going to be a lot of voters who are going to say, this dude isn't even the best player on their team.
No.
That's going to hurt him.
And not to conflate, to make sure there's no confusion. No one's sitting here arguing that Drew Aller should be bet on to win the Heisman. I just said I want to flip flop him and Ty Simpson. That's it.
I would flip flop Ty Simpson with Lenore Sellers. A couple other guys that have kind of bumped up since this has been updated. Julian Sane and Sam Levitt are both at plus 2,000 ahead of Dante and John Mateer. So since this has been updated, there's some other funky ones, Sean. They have Jackson Arnold at plus 2,500, Gunnar Stockton at plus 2,500, DJ Lagway at plus 2,800. Kevin Jennings all the way down at plus 3,000 surprised me a little bit. It did, because he's a returning quarterback. He's produced. He put up good numbers, led him playoff team. That one surprised me a little bit, to be honest with you. But John Mateer is an interesting one because if you look at his production from last year, Sean, and you say, okay, well, what if he goes to Oklahoma and has the same production that he had last year? So last year, John Mateer passed for 3,139 yards in only 12 games. So you didn't play in a bowl game. Had 29 passing touchdowns, and then also rushed for 826 yards and 15 touchdowns. So you're talking about a guy that in the regular season accounted for 3,965 yards and 44 touchdowns with only 7 picks. If he has that kind of production again at Oklahoma, they could be a 9-win team, and he's in the conversation. The question is not so much, can John Mateer, if he plays to his potential in that system, produce? And his OC at Washington State is, part of the reason he went to Oklahoma is because he followed his OC to Oklahoma. The concern for me is more of, he basically was a group of 5 quarterback. If we're being honest about John Mateer and Washington State, he's a group of 5 quarterback. He is. You look at the schedule they played last season. They played Texas Tech, and he went 9 of 19 for 115 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Ran for a bunch of yards, 197 yards and a touchdown, didn't throw very well. Against Washington in a 5-point win, he completed 50% of his passes, 245 yards, 7.2 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and he ran for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, good production, but not going to win you a Heisman Trophy. Then he goes for 390 against San Jose State, 327 against Boise State, 295 against Hawaii, 257 against San Diego State, 375 against New Mexico, 250 against Oregon State, and then 182 in a loss to Wyoming. Didn't play in the bowl game. Now, that could just be early in the season, but he wasn't a transfer, Sean. He was a third-year guy at Washington State. He'd been in that system for a while. I just wonder how he's going to translate when he plays against more athletic defenses. And that's been an issue for a lot of quarterbacks that went from the group of 5 level to the power 5 level, power 4 level. Now, some will point to Cam Ward. Here's my pushback on Cam Ward, though. Cam Ward was a 4-year starter in college. He started 2 years in Incarnate Word and 2 years at Washington State. So that's number one. He had 2 years at Washington State. Point number 2 is when Cam Ward was at Washington State, they were a Power 5 team. They were playing a Power 5 schedule. They were playing Pac-12 teams. Last year, John Mateer played 3 Power 5 teams, and it was Texas Tech, Washington, and I don't even, I guess you could really only say 2 because, do you want to count Oregon State as a Power 5 team? I don't, because they're in the same boat that Washington State was. Played 2 Power 5 teams. One of them went 8-5. One of them went 6-7. So I want to see, how does he handle the big boys in the schedule? That's an unknown. But how well but there's at least a chance for John Mateer. So I'm actually comfortable with his odds because Oklahoma is a team getting a lot of top 20 praise. He had big-time production last year. I actually think these odds show a healthy level of skepticism about that jump from the group of 5 level to the power 4 level. And so he's a guy that's a dark horse for me, because of the reasons I mentioned, but I need to see how he projects now that he's on the group of five, Power 4 level.
Yeah. I got a guy that's a dark horse.
That's what I was going to dive into next, Sean. So let's get to it.
If we're going to put Ty Simpson on here, who hasn't started?
You're really fired up about Ty Simpson.
I have no clue how Gunnar Stockton's not on here.
He's at plus 2,500, so he'd be tied with Dante and John Mateer.
I saw him against Notre Dame. He was the best player offensively that they had. Started in a big-time moment. And I think Georgia's going to be a good team. Once again, just based upon a good team, quarterback, what he's going to be able to do. They brought some talent in at wide receiver in the portal to help him out. They got a big-time talent, true freshman Taylor, local guy that's, played well throughout the spring. So I will have him up there definitely. And yeah, I'm going to, my boy Luke Altmaier should have some love. I don't know where he sits, but you darn right.
Here's Luke Altmaier from Illinois. He is at plus 25,000. So he's tied with Nate Frazier from Georgia, Zechariah Branch from Georgia, Cam Coleman, Byram Brown from South Florida, and then Quintravian Wisner from Texas. He has lower odds than Mikey Keene. Here's a sleeper for me, Sean, and it's Avery Davis. That's a sleeper for me. Second full year as a starter, third year starting games, true junior. He's going to be bigger and stronger. He's got some weapons around him to protect him. And playing in the Big 12, he has a chance to put up big numbers this year. Listen, if you're someone who likes quarterbacks, watch Big 12 football this year. Guys, there is so many good quarterbacks coming back, like college quarterbacks. I don't know how many of these guys are NFL prospects. But you've got Sawyer Robertson at Baylor. You've got Josh Hoover at TCU. You've got the Morton kid at Texas Tech. You've got the Salter kid transferring into Colorado. Iowa State's got Rocco Becht. And then, of course, you've got Avery Johnson, Jalen Daniels at Kansas. Like, there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the Big 12 this year. It's going to be a fun league to watch. But of all those guys, I think Avery's the one that has the legit shot to be in the Heisman conversation because he is a dynamic run-throw guy, and I think K-State has a shot to win the league. Oh, here's another guy that not a lot of people may not know about, but I'm telling you, get a chance to watch him play. That's Devin Dampier at Utah, the kid that transferred him to New Mexico State. He followed his OC. He was a 1,000-yard rusher last year and a 2,000-yard passer last year at New Mexico State. How's it going to translate? He's not a Heisman candidate. That's just more so. That's a fun player to watch this year. A lot of good quarterbacks in the Big 12 this year. One of the Big 12 coaches said the other day, we have the best quarterbacks in college football in our league. And I'm like, top to bottom, he's right. I don't know if they have any like elite, like number one draft pick, but as far as just a league loaded with good quarterbacks, the Big 12 has that. I like Avery Johnson as my Heisman sleeper coming out of that league. Because he can throw. He has improved as a passer. He's going to have to take another jump. But then he also has the running ability this year. And if J.C. Brown has another breakout in him to take his game to another level, you've got Dylan Edwards taking some of the pressure off of him. I could see Avery Johnson, Sean, taking a jump this year. He had 2,700 passing yards last year, 25 touchdowns, ran for 600 yards and 7 touchdowns in his first full year as a starter. I think there's definitely another level for him to get to, and I think he's going to get to it, which is why he's one of my dark horses. I mean, he had eight passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in the last 3. He had 10 touchdowns the last 3 games of the year last year. And he's a guy that I've got my eye on as a dark horse sleeper candidate. His odds are plus 5,000. So
I don't know.
I got my eyes on Avery.
I don't know if I would put these guys in the category of sleepers, but it's going to be interesting to watch because of the offense that they're going to that traditionally produces big-time numbers at the position. We just saw Tyler Shuck go to Louisville.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden become a second-round pick. Jeff Brom knows what he's doing with quarterbacks. So to get Miller Moss.
And he watched Miller Moss rip up his defense in a bowl game 2 years ago.
Yes. So to get Miller Moss, but we're going to talk about non-quarterbacks. I think there's a guy that's going to be next to Miller Moss that could definitely be a big play waiting to happen every snap that could garner some attention depending upon how good Louisville is. And then Notre Dame fans would know, hey, the Syracuse quarterback recently has put up big numbers.
Yeah. Who's that going to be?
If Steve Angeli or Ricky Collins, either one of them.
And we're going to talk about that on Thursday, Sean, but there's a legit battle going on there that I was told by yesterday. Somebody said that as of right now, it appears Ricky Collins is slightly ahead, but it's early. And part of that's because Ricky's the returner he was there in the spring, but that's going to be a battle. But whoever starts, Sean, to your point, is going to put up numbers. There's no doubt about that. I got another dark horse, Sean. So you said another dark horse for you is Miller Moss at Louisville. Totally get that. I got another one, Damon Williams at Washington, plus 6,500 odds. He's a kid that showed me some passing ability late in the year. Had a 300. I think he made his first career start. Was actually in the bowl game against Louisville. We're talking about Louisville, who started Harrison Bailey in that game. I believe Harrison Bailey started that game. But Damon Williams made, I believe that was his first start. He may have started against Oregon. I have to go back and watch that game. I know he played a bunch against Oregon. I don't remember if he did. But you look at the last 3 games of the year, Sean, where he got more playing time. He threw 8 passes against UCLA, 20 against Oregon, 32 against Louisville. He was over 80% completions in every single game. He was at 8.4, 10.1, and 11.7 yards per attempt. And he had 6 touchdowns and 1 interception. And then as a runner, he ran for 96 yards and another touchdown in those 3 games. So if you want to take like his production in the last 2 games where he played the most snaps. So let's go 65 yards rushing in 2 games. You put that out towards 12 games, that's 390 rushing yards and let's say 4 touchdowns. And then if you look at his passing production in the last 2 games when he played a bunch, and you project that over the course of the season, that gets him to 3,450 passing yards. I think he could certainly get to over 3,000 passing yards this season in the system he's playing in. As a team, they passed for 3,400 yards last year. But I also see him as a starter getting more production in the run game because he's a pretty dynamic runner too. Scrambler, some run game stuff. I could see him being a 3,000-yard passer, a 500-plus yard runner, 35-plus touchdowns. And if Washington can learn how to win some games away from home, they have a shot to get back into that top 10, top 15, or maybe he's a guy that's a dark horse for that team. I don't know about maybe winning it, but in the conversation, I could see Damon Williams being a guy that's in that conversation at some point in time. I mean, I look what Jed Fish did with Noah Fafidi a couple years ago, and I think Damon Williams is a more dynamic player than Noah Fafidi was, and I could see him being in there as well. Anybody else you have as a dark horse? I got one more, but I want to give you a shot to get another one in if you have another dark horse, Sean. I think my final dark horse is one that you and I have talked about before. Mm-hmm. Haynes King from Georgia Tech.
Yep.
If Haynes King can stay healthy this year, I think Georgia Tech has a chance to have some big upsets and maybe contend for the ACC title. They won't be a national championship contender, but I could see a world in which Georgia Tech plays for the ACC title. That if this is a giant if Haynes King can stay healthy, because if you look at how he started the season and then how he ended the season from a production standpoint, you look at the Georgia game, passed for 303 yards and 2 touchdowns, ran for 110 yards and 3 more touchdowns. That wasn't an anomaly, folks. I mean, he had 266 passing yards and 67 rushing yards for 3 touchdowns against Syracuse in a tough road loss. He passed for 312 yards and rushed for 58 yards and a touchdown in a hotly contested game against Louisville. This is a kid that is produced. Went in the bowl game against Vandy, had 204 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in that game in bad conditions. Haynes King is my other dark horse. He's got help. Obviously, you got Malik Rutherford at receiver. You've got Isaiah Canyon as an up-and-coming receiver. They got some guys in the portal at running back. Of course, you've got Haynes coming back, Jamal Haynes coming back at running back, who's one of my favorite players in the country at running back. He's a guy to me, Sean, and he's going to – and here's the thing about Haynes King, another reason why I think he's a guy that's a dark horse. He's got to play against Cade Klubnik and Clemson. He's got to play against CJ Bailey and NC State. He's got to play against Eli Holstein and Pitt. and he's going to have to play against Gunnar Stockton and Georgia. He's going to have some legit marquee games where he can raise his profile. And if they can be a 9-3 team and get to the ACC title game and he stays healthy, I could see him having 3,000 passing yards, 500-600 rushing yards, 35 plus touchdowns. And he's in a year where there's no great separators of quarterback. Haynes King sneaks into that conversation. Because the thing that makes the sleepers interesting, Sean, is they don't have we're going to pick your game apart like the contenders. Haynes King and Cade Klubnik could have the exact same performance, and they're going to pick Cade Klubnik apart because the expectations, and then they're going to hype up how great Haynes King did. That's why some of these, and then you notice a pattern about a lot of my dark horses, Sean. They're dual threat guys because they don't have to always do it with their arm, and that's why I throw them into this conversation. So it just speaks to how good I think quarterback plays in college football this year, Sean.
Styles make fights, especially when you're the judge. The flashy always looks better.
Yep.
Rather than the guy that just stalks his prey, right? And so when you see a guy that's able to run the ball and make plays with his arm, it's going to stand out more.
He's going to be on SportsCenter a lot more.
Absolutely. Yep. Rather than the guy. But I'm going to be honest with you. Two of the guys that you had as like sleepers and dark horses, I enjoy watching Avery Johnson and Haynes King more than any other quarterback on this list.
I mean, honestly,
sign me up to watch them play. Other
than Lenore Sellers and Cade Klubnik, I'd rather watch those two guys than any other quarterbacks on the list. We'll see what Arch does this year, but they're same with Damon Williams. That dude's fun to watch. And I'm telling you, got to watch Josh Hoover from TCU this year, Sean. Like, he is the epitome of like that college system quarterback that just produces, and he's just a baller. It's going to be a really fun year. It is. It's going to be a fun year. And this is what I love is there's so many good quarterbacks this year and some returners and then some newcomers. I think it's going to be a really fun year. I thought last year was a bit of a down year at quarterback nationally. I think this year is going to be the exact opposite. It's going to be a really fun year. And then, of course, you've got the two Notre Dame players, C.J. Carr, Jeremiah Love, as candidates as well. Sean, I actually am someone who does believe Jeremiah Love has a legitimate chance to win the Heisman Trophy because I think he's going to produce a little bit more in the run game this year, and not even necessarily because of, he's going to get the ball a lot more. I also think the thing with Jeremiah Love is I think he's going to be more efficient because of the play of the offensive line. I mean, Jeremiah Love last year, Sean, finished the year. I don't think people quite understand how good he was pre-injury, but Jeremiah Love last year, pre-injury, was averaging well over 7 yards a carry. And I think he's a guy that when you talk about just someone who can go out there and produce at a high level. I mean, the reality is he's over 1,000 yards in the regular season if he doesn't get hurt against USC. He finished the regular season with 949 yards rushing. And I'm factoring in his yards per carry number right now. He had 134 carries, 949 yards. So you do the math here real quick. And he was averaging 7.1 yards per carry. I could easily see him getting up to 7.3 this season in the regular season because of how dynamic the offense could be. He's a 7.1 last year. Why is it? It's not crazy. So even if he only has 140 carries, which is only 6 more carries than last year, and he's at 7.4 yards a carry, that gets him up to over 1,000 yards. And that's only if he has 6 more carries than last year. I think he'll carry the ball more than that. I think he'll be closer to 150 this year because I think he's going to take some of Riley's touches. And then if he's at 150 carries this year, which again is an average of 12.5 carries a game, but even if he's only at 750 and he averages 7.4 yards a carry, he's over 1,100. I also think Jeremiah is going to be way more productive in the pass game this year. And I know people, it's not enough rushing yards. It's not enough rushing yards. But if he goes over 500 receiving yards and he's at 20 touchdowns and he's a human highlight reel every week and there's no established quarterbacks, then I think he is someone who has a legit contender to finish in the top 5 in Heisman Trophy voting, in my opinion. So I actually do think he has a better shot than maybe some people think that he does. I don't think he needs to produce the way that Ashton Genty did last season because he's at Notre Dame. I mean, if Ashton Genty would have just rushed for 2,000 yards at Notre Dame last year, he rushed for over 26. If he just rushes for 2 at Notre Dame and 20 touchdowns, he wins the Heisman in a walk away. It's not even close. But he's at Boise. So I actually do think Jeremiah has a chance to be a legitimate top 5 contender. I'm not betting my mortgage on it, but I do think he's got a better shot than maybe some people think that he does. That's my 2
big
cents.
Plays. For Jeremiah Love, it comes down to big plays, big moments.
Mm-hmm.
Big plays, big moments.
Yep.
Gotta get off to a fast start on those 2 big national stages, the first 2 games. Have to announce yourself.
Like you did against A&M last year.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Have to announce yourself. And then once you announce yourself, just do what you do on a weekly basis. Bang USC, right? Because you didn't get a chance last year to play them because of injury.
Well, he had 99 yards when he got hurt in the first drive of the third quarter.
With the hurdle that everybody saw.
Yeah.
So now finish that. And anytime it's a running back, you can only help yourself if you have special teams value. That's what made Reggie Bush so special.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the fact that he's a great running back. Punt returns, kickoff. It was just so many dynamic ways that he was able to get touchdowns and make big plays, have big moments. But it's going to come down to big plays and big moments for Jeremiah Love.
There is absolutely a world in which Jeremiah Love ends the regular season with over 1,500 yards of offense and close to 20 touchdowns. I mean, he had 19 touchdowns last year and only had 2 in the postseason. 17 touchdowns last year. If Jeremiah Love is minimum 1,500 yards of total offense and 20 touchdowns at the end of the regular season, I think he's in the top 5 of Heisman Trophy voting. And because you got to remember, that doesn't mean you take carries away from Jadarian. You've got 180 carries last year that has to get split up from Riley Leonard between the quarterback's carries, the running back carries, and then the pass game. And that's where I come down to thinking and believing that he does, in fact, have a chance to maybe be a little bit more in this mix than maybe some people think that he does. So anyway, Sean, that's going to do it for our Heisman conversation. I think it's appreciate FanDuel putting that graphic together for us, so we kind of go over that. It's going to be interesting to see how that changes going into the season. I think we'll still see some movement. Really curious to see how it's going to shake out during the season and whether or not Notre Dame can have a legitimate contender. Is it going to be a quarterback dominant award this year? Are there some non-quarterbacks? Is there I don't see another Travis Hunter out there, a 2-way player that's going to, get there, that kind of thing. Does somebody who's a skill player that has return ability, like can a Desmond Reed have kind
Ryan Williams from Alabama?
Yeah, Ryan Williams. Des Reed's a guy that I could see go for 1,000 yards, 600 yards receiving, 1,000 yards rushing, couple big kick returns. He's going to have some spotlight game opportunities. Like, does somebody like that emerge? We'll see. I think it is going to be heavy quarterback again, though. But
Isaac Brown,
some skill guys. Isaac Brown from Louisville's a good one. What are his
special
odds?
teams value? Running back.
Let me see Isaac Brown. Where's Isaac at? He is at. All right. No. Wow. They don't even have him on here. And
wow.
Yeah. So you got Miller Moss at plus 5,000 is the only guy that they have listed as having plus. They have Squirrel White from Florida State on here, but. Malachi Fields on here, TJ Parker, Devontae Ross from Penn State, but they don't have the kid from Louisville. That's a mistake, in my opinion. That's a big oversight because, I mean, that's a dynamic football player right there. But I agree with your point, Sean, on him. He's a guy that could bring some other value, but that's where it's at. So anyway, that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Sean, thank you so much for being with me. Trev and I will be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock, for our BISA hold. We're actually going to have a practice report, a mini practice report, and then a BISA hold after that. Thursday, we're going to preview Notre Dame's next opponent, the Syracuse Orange. And then Friday, before the mailbag, we're going to preview Stanford. Then we're going to have all those because next week we are going to be previewing. We're going to have our prediction shows for the 4 conferences. Going to have a lot of fun because, Sean, we are 26 days away from Notre Dame kicking off the 2025 season.
Yes, sir.
Man, that's going to be fun. So, yeah, looking forward to. So, Sean Davis, I'm Brian Driscoll. Thank you all so much for being with us. We'll talk to you again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.